Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Teresa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Teresa.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have an open panel. And of course, I'm joined by my friend, colleague, and scholar, Jose Miguel. How you doing today, brother?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Appreciate you being able to join us today. Today, and the link for anybody who wants to join the open panel, it is available in the video description here on YouTube. And I'm going to post that. I'll actually post that in the comment section right now. So, or chat. Anybody who wants to join, we're going to be diving into Trump's peace deal, the Middle Eastern peace deal between Israel, Gaza. Attempts are being brokered between Israel, Iran, and whether it's already failed or if maybe by a miracle, some people believe that it's going to be successful. I would assume, actually, Jose and I have not discussed this yet, so I actually do not know his personal opinions on things moving forward. But for anybody who isn't aware, a few things have already occurred since the deal was signed. And I'm going to show you guys that. And then we're going to begin, Jose and I are going to begin chatting about it. But immediately following the supposed massive peace deal that occurred in Israel, interestingly enough, as I have right here, Israel was not one of the signers of the peace deal, which has raised a lot of conspiracy theories and speculation. But upon signing this, which we were told was between Israel and Hamas, Israel then began bombing after a bulldozer hit one of their own mines, and they claimed that this was an attack by Hamas, and basically started up their attacks. And not only that, they also bombed eastern Lebanon and killed one person, injured 10, all within this period. So certainly not off to a great start. But here's just a few articles that you can see within the last week. This is a week ago from today. It's taken only 24 hours, but Trump's fairy tale of peace in the Middle East seems doomed. White House works to preserve Gaza deal amid concerns about Netanyahu. And this is actually from today. This is a New York Times, or 2 days ago, New York Times. J.D. Vance is in Israel today to apparently speak with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in what is believed to be an attempt to push him away from his desire to continue his assault on Gaza in the name of fighting Hamas, killing, obviously, innocent children, innocent people in general. Here's another article, Al Jazeera, so it could be a little bit slanted, but this was a one that just kind of covered. A lot of Western news outlets were not covering Israel's attack in Lebanon, so I was just bringing that up to show it did occur. It was all over X. And then Witkoff and Kushner, this was also 2 days ago, meets with Netanyahu in Israel as clashes test Trump's Gaza peace deal. And if you've been following things online, let's see, I had something that I wanted to show from Matt Gaetz, actually. Matt Gaetz has been very outspoken regarding some of the things going on as of late. And he highlighted that Netanyahu was actively sabotaging these peace efforts, and that Trump has now sort of gotten wind of this. And maybe, again, we've speculated this in previous streams before, that maybe Netanyahu and Trump's relationship is soured. I find that highly unlikely, but here's Matt Gaetz. He says Bibi is now actively sabotaging Trump's peace deal, and Trump knows it. And it was talking about soon after the explosion in Rafah, I'm told by sources familiar with the White House and Pentagon knew that the incident was caused by Israeli settler bulldozer, again, running over Israeli mines. So what does all this mean? Well, certainly not optimistic like the Trump administration has been pushing. And here's another one. This is today. Israel Gaza live updates. Vance arrives at Netanyahu's office after calling for patience over hostage return. We're not going to play any of these videos, but something that both Steve Bannon and our friend Alex Jones has been discussing is that this whole dialectic seems to be a bit off, because we know for a fact that Netanyahu and Mossad have actually funded parts of Hamas and were instrumental in making them the sort of political representation of the Gazan people, or really the Palestinians, both the West Bank and Gaza, in an effort so that they'll never have to stop fighting, because they've basically created their own terrorist group that they then control and finance, very similar to the CIA. So with all that being said, I think the table's kind of set now where we can discuss this attempted or supposed peace deal that Trump was upset he wasn't nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Jose, I apologize for that long-winded introduction regarding the topic. But with all that being said, what are your thoughts on what's going on with the Trump administration and this Israel Gaza peace deal?
Yeah, it's what do you call it? For me, what's interesting is the financial aspect, because I know in the lead up to the ceasefire, what's it called? I know the Kushner family, and Trump's one of it is his daughter Ivanka, who married one of the Kushners.
Right.
Yeah, so they received like $1.5 billion from Qatar. So it's Qatar was the vehicle by which America used to directly financially support Hamas and what do you call it? Also, Israel itself used Qatar as well. So it's interesting that Qatar money flowed into the Kushner coffins before this current ceasefire. I know that the what do you call it? Israeli national security minister explicitly said on the live interview that the whole purpose of the ceasefire is just to get the hostages back, then they can resume hostilities. Which why he decided to say that publicly, I have no clue. But he's obviously not expecting to get much blowback from it.
Right.
In terms of like predictions, like I don't expect Israel to keep it because they're, again, the Likud party in particular is highly dedicated to the Greater Israel Project, and they themselves are enslaved. What do you call it? Netanyahu's not. He's not the actual man who's making decisions. He is very much so. He has his own oligarchs that he has to, what do you call it? Respond to. And ironically, his entire political career was established by the Adelson family, by Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, which I also find to be interesting because it was the Adelson support that was thrown for that was given to Trump in 2024, which allowed Trump to be able to win without fraud like he did, or like with what happened in 2020.
Right.
So that's the.
Well, did you see the video too during the peace deal that Miriam Adelson, the wife of Sheldon, who has passed away, gleefully excited about this whole thing, and he was talking as if like this was made possible by them. Of course, we know that she was the largest donor to the Trump campaign. Same with the 2016, but that was her husband at the time. And many people have speculated that they have a stranglehold over this administration one way or another. And they are, I mean, by far, and even Trump joked about it in the speech that even though they're American Jews, they're more pro-Israel than they are America, which for some reason he thought was funny.
Exactly. So it's what you call it. So it's interesting to me in terms of, all the money that's changing hands and where stuff is flowing to, and just how much in bed DC and Tel Aviv, frankly, are. And also how people usually tend to think of it, at least on more right-wing circles or whatever you want to call it, not moderate right circles, people tend to think of it as, they look at the Israeli influence within the U.S. government. But the reality is that the same oligarchs which influence, the same as, ironically, the same oligarchs of the particular tribe that wield tremendous influence over the U.S. government do the same thing within Israel. And so, like, I've actually talked with Israelis who will actually complain about Jewish oligarchs from the United States who are essentially forcing Israel to behave in a manner that's completely and totally self-destructive. So the fact is, it's the same oligarchical money and interest behind both governments, and that's why, frankly, when I look at Israel, I really don't see how it's not going to avoid a civil war. You have a lot of people who are fleeing the country rapidly; its economy is freezing up. I know people who have explicitly left Israel because they don't want to be called up to serve in the IDF, and Israel does not have. They don't have the stomach to stomach what do you call it, losses. Like, for example, the way that the Ukrainian military has experienced over the last 3 years, or for that matter, even the levels that Russia has experienced. Israel has always been, in the words of General Moshe, as well as Martin Van Creveld, who's probably the greatest strategic mind that Israel's produced. Both of them explicitly said that the main reason why Israel militarily has done well in the past is because they were fighting Arabs, and then two, the Israeli military is very much a flash in the pan. Like they're made. IDF is designed to hit super hard, but they don't have the ability to sustain combat. They cannot. What do you call it? Yeah, they cannot project force continually over a matter of years. And they even came out that the IDF actually told, like the IDF heads told Netanyahu just like 4 months in that there was no way they were going to be able to defeat Hamas at that point. And so that was where the decision was made to clear as much land of the civilian population as you can.
Right. And did you see the video of the American journalist that was set up by the IDF?
No, I didn't. I did not.
So over in the West Bank, and this is true for Nazareth and various important Christian strongholds that were still left in some of the Holy Land. Of course, they're forcing these people to flee. They're causing violence. Then they have a bunch of actually New York Jews taking their spot. And so apparently there's this network that has been kind of tied with this piece, the larger. This is a specific incident in which an American journalist was lured by the IDF into an ambush by these settlers. And so some of them are Israeli, but apparently there's a network where they will contact Jews that are on waiting lists, specifically in America and predominantly in New York, around New York City. And then they will fly over to Israel, and they will be part of a large group of people that will then go and essentially continue the occupation. And they did this with a Christian village. And this is all going on in the West Bank. And so apparently within the last year, they've taken a significant swath of homes in the region through this methodology. So anyways, it's very interesting. And it's so bold that when the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, brought this up, he was said that if essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but the way that I read it on X was this, they were provoking the Israelis or something, and that the U.S. is not going to support people that are fighting against the Israeli citizenry and something like that. And so essentially don't seek help from the U.S. embassy in Israel if you're part of these actions. So no response, no aid from the U.S. regarding the American journalists. Of course, we know American journalists were killed within the last year in that region. So,
and it's part of the strategic thought of Israel. I mean, in this case, like for example, like 2019, in the words of Netanyahu himself, he said, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. So that is why Yasser Arafat had to go, because you had the possibility of a viable Palestinian state, which would prevent Israel from achieving its own security and national goals. And the fact is, the conflict currently happening in Gaza is very much a cover for finishing off the West Bank. The West Bank, of course, being a much, much larger piece of territory that Israel wants to grab than just the Gaza Strip.
Right. Roscoe, welcome, brother. Good to see you, my man. What are your thoughts on the topic?
Well, I think that Israel will intentionally poison pill any attempt to have a two-state solution or to have any lasting peace.
Yep.
We've had several Israeli prime ministers in the past allude to the what's known as mowing the grass, right? Naftali Bennett is actually he mentioned this in a speech. He was a prior Israeli prime minister. Talks about this idea of always needing to be on the offensive, always needing to degrade the Palestinian infrastructure as a sort of tactic to wear them down over time. And so I highly doubt that any lasting peace will occur. I mean, if a peace plan is made, I mean, there's no real guaranteed future even for the Palestinians to have any kind of life like what Arabs in the Arabian Peninsula might have, right? Where these more richer Gulf states, they can afford a certain lifestyle. These people will never have that, and the Israelis want to keep them in perpetual poverty because they know it will lead to the same sort of Hamas terroristic lashing out, which then gives them pretext to further make territorial expansions. Right? It's just part of their plan. There's really nothing that Trump or any other president can do about it, and they never have been able to do anything about it, because just like in Camp David and the Oslo Accords, Israel continually poison pills these agreements.
Yes.
They will slip things in there like you can't. We have to manage your police force for you. You're not allowed this certain neighborhood in East Jerusalem where it's primarily Arab demographics. We're not going to let you govern a massive segment of the land that we agreed in prior agreements that you were supposed to have. And so when the Arabs come back to the table, like Palestinians, when they come back to the table and say, well, no, we need to parse this out and negotiate for a better deal because you guys made promises that you're not keeping with.
Right.
Well, then it's perceived as, okay, well, these people are stonewalling the agreement, and then the Palestinian populace gets pissed off, and then they start maybe doing some, bad optics things like killing, maybe they lash out on Israel.
Sure.
I mean, some would say rightly so. It gives them then pretext to attack them, like what happened with Arafat's negotiations, how
Right.
it led to the Intifadas, where the Palestinians lash out because of the blatant Israeli. It's basically an insult, the kind of
Right.
stuff.
Well, and it's a tactic of the intelligence agency, the false dialectic. I mean, we've done this with ISIS. We did this with Al Qaeda. The CIA was instrumental in both of those organizations, and then that we've used them and propped them up. I mean, even Tucker's recent 9/11 series. I don't know if you guys have been following those videos that he's posted, the 5-part series on 9/11. I mean, it conclusively shows that the 9/11 report was totally fabricated, that both definitely the CIA, some in the FBI, but there was an intentional effort by the CIA to withhold information from the FBI, that they knew that these terrorists were in the country for up to a year. They knew where they lived. They knew where they were taking pilot lessons, and they knew this whole the coordinated plan that was underway. And so you then create the dialectic, right? And that's exactly what Netanyahu and Israel has done with Hamas. And that's where I agree with you. It's not just a poisoning of the well from preventing a potential peace agreement. They've already concocted a framework that nullifies any potential peace negotiation moving forward, because they've already inserted the quote unquote terrorist organization. Of course, you can't negotiate with terrorists if you're a good Western democracy. So to me, this is just all a major facade, I think. And the ironic thing that, Israel continued attacks, I think it has to do with the optics of Israel, and that the sentiments, I mean, it's just so mainstream now. You can't watch a Pierce Morgan, hot panel without 3/4 of the panel being like, yeah, Israel's pretty bad. Like, what they're doing is a little just over the top. We already know the generational difference between the West, Europe, to give them credit, where sometimes we're very critical of Europe. At least Europe, both the boomers and the youngers are already anti-Israel or anti-Zionist, I should say. But here in America, definitely millennials and Gen Z. So I think Israel's in an incredibly tough place, and all the actions they keep doing make it worse. And I think there's a spiritual warfare that's happening underneath the surface regarding all this stuff, but it's just amazing, the ineptitude, the propaganda, the $7,000 posts by influencers. It's all so obvious, and it's just amazing that with the level of power and influence they have, how pathetic the propaganda and the efforts for their public reputation are right now. You guys thoughts on that?
It's just funny watching optics hitting real life, and that you had that what do you call it? You had this interesting heated discussion between I think it was the China's representative to the UN and the Israeli talking back and forth to each other, and the Chinaman is just saying to him, "We don't care." So
Oh, I didn't see this. When was this?
okay.
Recent?
Yeah, that's the only thing I've actually seen video wise. I mostly just read, but yeah, there was one of the Chinese officials that these Israeli diplomat or Israeli ambassador, I think it was to the UN, was trying to shame the Chinese guy over something, and the Chinaman who was the representative of the CPC said, "We don't care. Like, this is what you're doing, and I don't care whether or not you're going to contradict me or not." And essentially, your word magic only works on Americans. It's not going to work on me. So
Wow.
it's fun. It's just the tactical position of let's say the tactical position of Israel, or the strategic position of Israel. It's over as a state. Like, frankly, I don't see any way that it's going to still exist in 20 years. It's intentionally been hostile to all of its neighbors, and it doesn't even have sufficient depth, or what do you call it, strategic depth of its own to defend itself.
Right.
Once the U.S. is gone, they have no outside support whatsoever.
Well, they just sort of keep digging themselves a hole. I mean, I remember watching this one segment from Fuentes. It's just like no matter what they say, they can never win anything, any rhetorical battle ever. Every single thing that their public relations guys say, whether it be on Twitter or whether it be on the sort of Piers Morgan style interviews, the sort of almost blood sports debates, I'd say, it's just like it just digs them a deeper and deeper hole. They can't seem to really gain a rhetorical grasp on anything. These sort of old magical words like Nazi, racist, it just doesn't hit the same. People are sort of awake to the issues, I guess you could say.
Well, I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. You brought up magic and more in a, you know, an analogy type framework, but I mean quite literally. I recently posted a clip video from a previous stream I did, and there was an article that was floating around as a Substack article on the rise of Satanism and Moloch worship in Israel. And reading that article, he highlights that these essentially like Burning Man type festivals that we have here in America, they have very similar festivals. The only caveat is that it's very in vogue to participate in what is deemed as like these ancient rituals of these ancient gods. And so, like in the article, it showed a guy kind of at a Burning Man, but he's dressed up as what he believed to be what a priest for Moloch would look like, and Baal worship, and that Satanism, according to the article, that per square foot there is more Satanists in the country of Israel than anywhere else in the world. And if that's true, and if that is the case, allegedly, what I find interesting is then the continuation of the history of human sacrifice. And I don't mean that everybody in Israel, both pro Likud or Netanyahu or against him, are, consciously participating in some occult ritual. But if those spirits are already present in that territory and they're inhabiting people that are then promoting it and elevating that type of spirituality, I think a real case could be made that, it is a sort of ritualistic cleansing that's happening to the Palestinian people, and the killing of children, the lack of attempt to prevent civilian casualties makes it seem like sacrificing the innocent, which is the purpose of a human sacrifice in the occultic sense, that this is tied to it. That it, of course, as us Orthodox Christians, whatever Messiah they're hoping to come and create world peace through the building of the third temple and the Greater Israel Project, that's our Antichrist. And so I'm with Jose, where I just don't see where they have a future, but at the same time, I find it difficult to envision a world in which Israel doesn't exist, because it seems like we're, at least in the eschatological timeline, it seems like we're moving in that direction. But I'm with both you guys. It's like, I don't like how do they persist in 2 decades? I just
know that well, as you mentioned, you have Jews from New York who are going to the West Bank to settle. You also have Israeli Jews who are fleeing back to New York and are working on settling upstate New York. So that's and now there actually are counties that are turning majority Jewish, and it's interesting watching. You can look at, I only watched a few, but there are videos of when they take over the local school boards, etc. Like, things get wild. So it's yeah, and the rise of Moloch worship I find to be interesting, just because I was going down the Punic theory of the origins of modern Jews, because when the temple was destroyed, the highest concentration of Jews within the Roman Empire was on the northern Libyan coast as well as in southern Spain, and those were two like centers of the Carthaginian Empire. Right. And then there's the issue of Moloch, meaning in the Canaanite language, the Punic language, which is a Canaanite language, it means sacrifice, right? Which is associated with child sacrifice. And that's sacrifice that was given to Baal and his consorts and it in the Carthaginian religion. Frankly, a lot of things things that I knew from the Talmud didn't make sense until I looked at the Carthaginian religion. So it's anyway, to me, it just lends credence to the Canaanite, Canaanite theory of the origin of those who currently call themselves Jews. And I know the genetics now actually are showing, and we're backing that up, which I find to be interesting, that over 50%. So for most Jewish populations, over 50% of their DNA is Canaanite in origin. So it's there was even like Times of Israel even ran an article by one Persian Jew who was talking about how he was surprised when he did his genetic testing and it came back like essentially almost 100% Canaanite, not actually Jewish. So
that's interesting. Because I don't know.
I asked you guys that, by the way, if you don't mind me asking.
Mm-hmm.
Which diaspora would that be?
So
Sephardi or Ashkenazi?
Ashkenazi and Sephardi.
Okay. Do you think that could be because like the Israelites did mix in with Canaanites? Like they have a very similar genetic composition. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, there's definitely admixture, but like, I mean, if you compare that to, like, for example, like a Palestinians, like, 87% of Palestinian DNA originates from Hebrews. So it's in that sense, what do you call it? Your average Palestinian is more Hebrew than your average self-proclaimed Jew.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Well, the academics will say that it's actually like 87% Canaanite. So they'd say that the Hebrews would be part of that sort of ethno-linguistic family tree, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, there are people who try to tie the two together. The thing is, like, you can differentiate between like polities. So I know, like, what do you call it? So, I mean, this is before genetics. Genetics was a thing, but I know, like, what's his name? David Ben-Gurion. He was pushing back in the 20s, back in the 1920s and 1930s that they just needed to get Palestinians to recognize that they were in fact Jews, so that way then they could just integrate them into the Greater Israel Project directly. That was his original intent. Of course, his followers today have given up on that. Yeah, I mean, there are people who try to confuse the two, but they are definitely, what do you call it? Like we're definitely at the point where they can tell when a town is Hebrew versus, like, if you're looking at Iron Age towns, they can tell when it's a Hebrew town versus a Canaanite town within Palestine.
Well, what I was going to mention too with the genetic testing in Israel is, I don't know where you guys stand, but I'm certainly someone who finds the 13th tribe theory by Arthur Kessler very compelling, the Khazarian theory for Ashkenazi identity. And so from what I understand, it's actually very difficult to have like a non-state sanctioned genetic test in Israel. So again, I don't know what that means, but I'd be curious, because if they do have a genetic test that even the Times of Israel or Haaretz has said identifies the majority of Israeli citizens as maybe not fully Jewish or Israeli, however you want to define that, I'd find that very interesting, because from my understanding, like that book, The 13th Tribe, is banned, and certain genetic testing is banned in Israel, potentially for that reason. But it's kind of a conspiracy theory because we can't really test it.
Yep, that's why for me it's like I look at what is the state propaganda that Israel puts out? What is the but also looking for parallels in terms of religious worship and practice and behavior.
Right.
That to me is a bit compelling. That's why, I mean, at this point, I do lean a bit towards the Punic theory. I know Ron Unz wrote a very long thing on it recently, I think last week, that I read, and he was summing it up, a lot of the stuff in one place. And now I have a bunch of books that I need to get my hands on at some point so that I can dive down that myself.
Right.
Interestingly enough, he was only citing books that were coming out of professors from like the universities in Israel.
Right. Well, Emmanuel said Magic Mormon Undies raid. Well, I welcome all the Joseph Jim Bob Smith worshipers. So I'm glad you guys are over here at COTEL. So thank you very much, Well Emmanuel. God bless you, brother. Austin Tertulio throws in 5, says, let's smash this goal, y'all. Please. I'm trying to raise money to get down to DebateCon with the Wilsons, Jim Bob, Jake Rattlesnake, and a whole host of other people. So all the proceeds raised today are going to that trip, and as well as the trip to Florida for the Athens Jerusalem conference with Dyer, FDA, Metropolitan Joan, and Father Vladimir. So if you guys are able, please support the work, support the channel, and help me do some of the traveling for the events coming up. Jake the Guitar God throws in 5. Thank you very much, brother. Do appreciate it. And also, I want to mention anybody who's ordered a book, I got 40 books signed and sent out. I'm waiting for bubble mailers to come in, and I'll get another 20 to 30 sent out. And then until the next batch of 50 more books come in, I'll get those. So if you're one of the first 40 people that purchased books, yours is in the mail right now. So thank you, everybody that has supported the work and purchased a book through the website. I appreciate that. OCA Christian says, I want to believe Trump's deal will last, but who is anyone kidding? There will never be peace in a land adjacent to Islam. Islam and peace are antithetical and cannot exist at the same time. I wanted to highlight this comment because I wanted to shift kind of the conversation about what are your guys' thoughts regarding the region, specifically concerning the Islamic states. One of the things, the major photo from the Trump peace deal, if you guys saw, was like him with the Arab leaders in Egypt. And from my understanding, one of the underlying agreements of why the Arab world was supportive was because Trump was going to sanction Iran, excuse me, and that some of the OPEC nations and the oil countries, that they're in favor of this potential possibility, and that they view Iran as a rival power in the region. And so the way that Trump was able to sort of leverage his influence and power so that the Arab nations would join in this quote unquote peace deal was to essentially re-identify Iran as the regional major threat, and that the U.S. would act on behalf of those Arab nations. Did you guys see that? What are you guys' thoughts regarding Islam currently in the region regarding the peace deal or moving forward? What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, in terms of a historical note, I mean, if one's defining peace as an absence of war, then Iran, Russia were peaceful with each other for 200 years until Peter the Great decided to invade Iran. So it's what do you call it? I mean, there's Islam, the religion itself. There's no peace as in the sense of peace, like Christ being the Prince of Peace. But the idea that one cannot have a peaceful border with an Islamic nation is just completely false. And there are plenty of cases where you had, for example, Russia, an Orthodox nation that had a peaceful border with an Islamic neighbor. It is possible and doable. However, I'll point out that typically how it works is, like, for example, in the Byzantium experience, when the Shia are on the down low or on the weaker spot, and the Sunni are in the stronger spot, you support your Shia neighbors to go fight the Sunni, and vice versa. So that's how Byzantium managed to survive for centuries. And unfortunately for Byzantium, it was the Crusaders that messed up that calculations, because the Shia, the Fatimids in particular, were in the weaker spot, and the Crusaders went all hog on the Fatimids, with the end result being Saladin subduing all of Egypt and essentially turning Egypt into a Sunni powerhouse.
Right.
So with the entirety of the Levant and Egypt, he essentially guaranteed that the days of the Christian Roman Empire were numbered, and that the Crusader states were not going to have any chance of having any long-term survival. So that's the thing to take into account. What do you call it? Yeah. So it's just, geopolitics gets interesting. Like the fact is, the reality is, if you're the commander, if you're a ruler of a state, you got to figure out how to live next door to your neighbor. And that's just true for everyone. Like, take, for example, like the United States and Canada. Canada's just going to be America's hat, because if Canada is not, then America is just going to whip Canada. And the fact is, ironically, the Canadian-American relations, America's invaded Canada twice. So technically, Iran and Russia had a more peaceful relationship than Canada and the United States on an annualized basis.
Roscoe, you got thoughts, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely possible to have some degree of peace with the Sunni Islamic countries like Egypt and Jordan.
Right.
I mean, you've been able to pay off those countries for a pretty long time. As long as you pay tribute to the caliphate, they won't raid your ships. It's kind of like a Tripoli situation where you pay them off, you pay off the tribute, they leave you alone, at least somewhat, until they decide not to.
The other option is you can always do the Spanish solution, like with Morocco, where you just send in the ships and you level their ports until they agree to stop pirating. So,
hey, Robert Rogers, why don't you join the stream, bro? If we're looking for disagreement here. If anybody is really optimistic about Trump, or you think we're way off on Israel or Islam, you think Jose's simping for Islam, join the stream, brother. We'd love to hash it out. That's the point of the open panel. This isn't just people that agree with us. If anybody disagrees, you think we're totally way off, you think Israel's got the upper hand, or you think Islam, for whatever reason, whatever side you're on, join the stream. That's the point.
Yep. No, the fact is, in terms of history, like if you're looking at per capita annualized basis of warmongering or going on offensive wars, the most warmongering people on the planet are hands down the Mongols. And number two are Americans. America has been in an offensive war for all but 16 years of its existence as a state.
Right. Now, I mean, regarding Islam, I have sympathy for the Palestinians and the historical context. But this whole dialectic that part of the Israeli propaganda is trying to push is that if you are supportive of the Palestinians, that you must be supportive of Islam. I mean, I think Islam is a major threat to our civilization. I don't know if I guess when I say civilization, I don't mean in I'm super in defense of like Western Enlightenment values or something, but just whatever's left and intact of the Western project. And just for stability's sake and raising a family, I'm in favor of that, whether I agree with, the Masonic foundations of America or not. But the call to prayer in Dearborn, Michigan, some of the stuff that they're openly saying here in the United States, and specifically in Texas and Michigan, one of the things that pissed me off was yesterday was Diwali, and I had like a handful of houses around where I'm living, and they're all shooting off fireworks at like past 11 o'clock at night. It's like, and so anyways, point being is I do see Islam as a major threat, and I am no fan of Islam. I find it, and I'm very aware of Islamic history. I'm aware of, the great poets and the medieval period and of Persia and some of the high points of their history and even philosophy and their contributions to the world. But Islam at large, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want it around me. I don't want it around my children. And so this, and the same thing's true with Zionism. And the question is, which one's a greater threat to America right now, or an American right now? I would say it's Zionism. But that does not mean that we're in favor of Islam or supportive of it in any way.
I think Islam is a much bigger threat in Europe than it is America. A lot of these people will sort of project that onto Americans, people in North America in general, as if it's a big enough issue for us to really acknowledge. But yeah, I mean, I still do think that it is possible to achieve peace with Muslim countries. The solution is, I think, to advocate for, or for the Western alliance to advocate for sort of secular pan-Arabism. That would be a solution. I mean, you could enrich these countries, make them.
They're not already rich.
I mean, their fertility rates are going down. Iran is below replacement.
Is that a bad thing? I mean, they celebrate the birth rates of Europe. They talk openly within Europe about conquering it.
I'm talking about like Middle Eastern countries. If you enrich them enough, their fertility rates will go down. Like that's what's happening.
I see. Okay, sorry, I misunderstand the argument. Right. You're saying to make them essentially that theory that first world nations always drop in under replacement.
I mean, there's like maybe we could come up with some novel invention to make it so that that's not the case, that first world countries decrease in population. But like generally speaking, once a country gets rich, I mean, it secularizes, the fertility rates go down. That's what's happening in Iran. Like the ruling establishment, a lot of the people in that country don't like them. And they have like a 1.6 fertility rate. That's like any other European country, maybe just lower quality of life overall, but it's still secularizing. I mean, I don't see why that can't be done across the entire Middle East. You know what I'm saying? So it's
I get your point now.
Yeah. The thing to take into account too, though, is so like the U.S. or the Anglo-American Empire as a whole has always had a habit of playing both sides. So in the case of Iran, when the birth rate started dropping, it was after the Ayatollah came to power, in the Iranian Revolution. What most people don't realize is that, well, yes, the Shah was in bed with the Americans and the British. The Ayatollah was also in bed with the British as well. And one of the things that Britain pushed the Ayatollah for is because the Ayatollah was actually down for reducing the average family size in Iran. So when he came to power, he essentially thought we're pushing birth control, etc., on the Iranian population. And that's where Ahmadinejad, however you pronounce his name, that president who got assassinated not too recently, but he was assassinated a few months ago. It becomes interesting because when he rose to power, part of why he was so hated in the West and why he got sanctioned was because he actually opposed the use of birth control, was opposed to the anti-family policies of the Ayatollah. So he was trying to reverse that and undo that. And Iran actually had a two-child policy, which was a British idea, similar to how Mao's one-child policy was a Rockefeller idea, that he was essentially that Mao forced onto China and the Ayatollah forced onto Iran. Ahmadinejad actually broke that. He had more than two kids, and that's why two of his sons were assassinated alongside him. It was essentially a spiting of the West, essentially spiting, or Israel spiting him, and for going against what they were trying to do. So I know, like, his attempts to try to reverse the birth collapse in Iran has failed. And frankly, like, the chief, it's not so much like the wealth was the issue. Like, the chief vector, it's feminism. And there's a study that Russia did that shows that in terms of socioeconomic factors, the thing that matters the most is the average expected amount of time a young person is expected to be in education. So for your average man, whenever he's expected to be done with his education, it takes him 2 to 3 years to be able to establish himself where he can afford to get married. For your average woman, it takes about 2 to 3 years after however long she's expected to be in school for her to find the guy that she's going to settle down and have a family with. So once you have once you have a mean time to finish education that is greater than 10 years, you're doomed to go below replacement. So that's why, like, for example, right now the Russian government is looking at actually essentially trying to rework how education works in Russia, where make sure that you don't have, eliminate expectations that women should be going to college, and also B, looking at going from 12 grades of grade school to 10 grades, because that would actually get them to being above replacements for most women. And then you'd have the tiny faction of super fertile Orthodox women who have 10 kids, and that will restore Russia's demographics. So that's something I find to be very interesting. Like, the most effective thing for reducing population growth isn't actually even making people wealthy, because you can do the same with indebting them. The most effective thing is just increasing the amount of time a woman spends in school. That's why, like, if a woman goes to college, the odds of her dying childless skyrocket by 57%. And if you throw in a master's degree or a PhD on top of that, it just skyrockets even higher. And this is where it gets interesting, where education, higher education, is actually more effective birth control than the birth control pill, because people tend to mess up with the birth control pill, and a kid happens. Right. Whereas college, for population control purposes, investing in or pushing women into longer and longer education spans is the best guarantee you can get to reduce the number of new births.
No, I think that's a really sensitive topic, but something I saw an article that was talking about that statistical correlation with female education, feminism, birth rates, all these different things, relationships. And it goes exactly to your point, which, again, is kind of a sensitive topic. I mean, it's not that we don't want women or our daughters, our wives, to be smart and educated, but the system itself, I don't know. It just, the whole thing produces the antidote to a successful civilization, and women, taking on this sort of, whatever wave of feminists you want to describe some of them, but I don't know. It's pretty pathetic. Ivan, thanks for joining, brother. What are your thoughts on everything?
Well, I kind of agree with Roscoe in terms of the strategy that Israel is pursuing. At the same time, I think I'm more on your side in terms of thinking that for some reason Israel still keeps trucking along, and it has a lot of influence, especially among the boomers. So it's okay, we can sense that there's a vibe shift and that the Zoomers no longer shield for Israel as much. But the reality is that you've got politicians like Ted Cruz going on long tirades about how America is supporting Israel because it's in America's best interest to do so, and you have whole auditoriums of people clapping and crying when he's saying these things. You have people for example, I don't know, James Lindsay, who has 500,000 followers on Twitter, going and kissing the wall. It's
but look at the comments, though. I mean, I get that there's people that are part of the establishment, but the energy isn't on their side. I mean, just go on the comment section, even on Instagram. It's not just X. People say X is an echo chamber. Look on Facebook. Look on Instagram. Look on a YouTube video. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's I don't know how they recover. So I don't see, there's going to be a bunch more. I'm sure the system will try, but I don't see the appeal of a Ted Cruz and his, absolute devotion to Israel being a thing moving forward. I just don't think those candidates. I'm sure there'll be some, and what I think the movement will be is they'll try to hide their affiliation, which is what's happening with Democrats right now. I mean, just within the last week, a handful of major Democratic Congress people and senators are told by very pro-Palestinian leftists that we won't vote for a candidate that supports by AIPAC. I mean, Gavin Newsom was asked this by a black dude like a week ago, and all he's, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I never think about AIPAC. That's interesting. But you can see that even the Democratic establishment, they're paid by the same people that the Republicans are. So it just feels like the cultural zeitgeist and energy, both right and left, Israel will not be a major entity that is supported by Americans in the next 30, 40 years. It just won't be.
Yeah, let's hope that is true. I mean, my hope is the same. I think, however, that there is a reason why, let's say, the establishment keeps trucking along as if nothing had changed. Like, because you can have an issue where, I don't know, for example, 70% of the population is against that issue, but is it enough for that 70% to say, okay, I'm not going to vote for, let's say, Trump because I don't know, I hate Israel or whatever so much, or I hate the situation with geopolitical stuff right now, that I'm willing to forego maybe winning with this very strong candidate, instead of like just simply like saying, okay, this is very peripheral to my interests right now. Like people have priorities, and like I wish that people had such principled stances, but I don't think they do. So like it's up in the air for me.
I think people are becoming more principled. I think that the economic context of the West, the lack of future prospects for especially Gen Zers, they're forced to become more conscious. I think that's what's going on with the white race realism in America right now. Is it's the generation that is forced the most multi-diversity, DEI, all this different stuff, that they've been forced to become hypersensitive and self-aware of their own racial identity, which does the exact opposite to like creating some, bland melting pot, which is what the goal is. Because in history, any group that is a minority maintains their identity better than the majority group, because that's how, that's just that they create insular communities. I think that's happening in America right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. At the same time, I'm very scared of like people having like their bellies a little bit too full, because when you have people who hold institutional power and they can offer you money, a career, whatever, there are a lot of people who are going to turncoat. There are a lot of people who are going to, like, say, be critical of Israel and then moderate their speech, moderate their actions. And the question is, will the establishment be strong enough to entice those people and to somehow quell the energy that is already bubbling up? Or is this, let's say, a real spiritual awakening in regards to like the treacherousness of these people who are basically doing their best to subjugate European people, in terms of like not just European, but like European stock people? Because what I see right now, for example, in Europe, and I live here, I live in Madrid, what I see is a lot of, let's say, people who want to voice their concerns about these things, but at the same time, they have no outlet for it. They have no outlet for it because they have no power, and because they have everything to lose. Yet, like young people, even though they might see bleak prospects, at the same time they want to participate in a system, and the people who hold the keys to participation in that system are still in bed with these people. They're still in bed with this power structure. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. Hopefully something will change, because we all see it. It's the same thing with the immigration. Like, who is the first person to say that we should receive more Muslim immigrants? It's the Jews.
Well,
I'm sorry.
that's what I actually put this on Roscoe. I'll have him respond to this, because he made the point that he thought Islam was the greater threat, especially in the European context, and it certainly is. I would grant him that. What I would pose then and get your response on is, which one's worse, the NGOs that flooded Europe and America with the migrants, or now I guess you could, because I would agree with you in today's circumstance in October 22nd, 2025, Islam is the threat because it's already here, especially in the European context. So it's like the immediate pragmatic threat to English identity, German identity, French identity, Swedish identity. I saw that in Sweden, aren't they like 20% now? I mean, I thought it was like I was blown away by the percent of the Muslim population in Sweden. It literally boggled my mind. And it's like that is the immediate pragmatic thing, but it's the infrastructure that we just talked about with AIPAC. It's the infrastructure with the Jewish New York settlers in the West Bank. It's the NGOs that are flooding first world nations in an attempt to bring forth the prophecies, right? The necessity for the historical context for a new Messiah. And so with all that said, Roscoe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Canada, and so you can talk about the whole what's bad, the sort of kippa wearing NGOs. Sorry about the doorbell. The kippa wearing NGOs or the people who are already here. Now, when you look at Parliament, like the MPs, the members of Parliament, they're forming political conclaves now of like Sikhs, Indians. These people are forming like organic unities within the country itself.
Yeah,
while
it's happening.
Jewish influence was an organic unity and still continues to be. It's getting sort of mitigated by the fact that these other political organic unities are being formed, and so you can ask, which is worse, the people with the funny hats opening the gates to Toledo, or the people who are besieging the country and now killing you guys,
right?
Which is worse, the people who aided the Sassanids in entering Jerusalem and then ended up slaughtering Christian communities, or the people who are vastly outnumbering you and will politically dominate you and oppress you for centuries to come, even if you hypothetically get rid of the sort of Jewish element.
Right.
Like, I think the cards are sort of stacked up already. White people are slaves, unfortunately, of their own morality, and they will continue being slaves to this boomer mentality, this sort of MLK, treat everyone by their character, not by the color of their skin or their ethnicity, which is ridiculous. They will take that even to their grave. It's almost like Christian martyrdom. Like, these people are martyrs for cucking their own heritage. And so, you can ask which organic unity is worse. I think there's a parasitic mentality within the minds of white people to begin with. It's a curse to ourselves, and that's really what's driving the issues. There is you can look this up, Romanian legionnaire who said, you get the bagels that you deserve, and so we sort of get what we deserve because we're a Weimar society. I mean, is this not what we deserve? Is God not sort of flooding us with foreigners like it talks about in Deuteronomy and Maccabees?
Yeah.
Because
absolutely. I think it's totally biblical in that sense.
It's sort of our own fault. We were supposed to be the chosen people, the Church of God, and we apostatized, and this is what we get. It's Jerusalem 70 AD. We are being besieged by foreigners, by Romans.
What you're talking about right now is exactly what was going through my mind yesterday with Diwali. So I saw the video of like Trump lighting a candle for the Hindus in America. And then as soon as like evening began, the sun wasn't even down, like fireworks kept going off, and I didn't even connect it at first, but I'm like over in major places. It was just all over the city. And I'm on the south side of Indianapolis, and the government, because they pay off these states. So our lieutenant governor wants to bring in 40,000 Haitians. And of course, the population of Indiana doesn't want it at all. It's a very homogenous conservative state, and the people are to the right of Mike Pence, but Mike Pence is kind of indicative. I mean, he's no longer in politics, but he's representative, like the Indiana GOP, like just total rhino establishment. But they have a monopoly on the state because most people are lean red. But I've mentioned this in previous streams, the total demographics of the areas, the entirety of Indianapolis is being changed mostly by Indians. I mean, they're bringing so many in so quickly. It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's a night and day difference from 5 years ago. It's just incredible. And yeah, to your point, I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter who opened the gates. It's that the gates have been open. We got to get people out. And that's where I think the deportation efforts, even though, I'm very much in favor of mass deportations, but the numbers are so damn low. I mean, I get the rhetoric and the memeing the Trump administration is doing online, but you just compare the numbers. The only hopeful thing is that, at least if it's true, is what's being reported is like 2.1 million have self-deported. Now, I find that skeptical, but that's what is being reported through self-deportations.
If I may chime in on that, I think that the problem is that the boomers are representative of, let's say, the Enlightenment project, and like we keep on wanting to think that, let's say, because we may love, let's say, our ancestors, and we are called to do that, that we have sort of like a common allegiance in terms of what we are representing as an identity, because let's say we're the same race, or like we are in the same nation or whatever. But the reality is, like, if you're a Christian, like your allegiance is to the church first. And when you're looking at your own country, you're looking at it in terms of like, what is orthodox about it, right? So like right now, my hope is on Christian nationalism emerging, even if it's not like a clean thing. And the Orthodox voices that try to caution against it, I have nothing against people, I don't know, like Father Turbo Qualls, or who I respect a lot, or even this English writer who speaks against, let's say, Christian civilization, in the sense of like, let's pursue Christ and let's put the culture or whatever on a second plane. Like, I can agree with all of those things, but at the same time, it's like, at some point you have to accept that it's going to be like a dirty. Politics is dirty. That if you want to pursue justice, you cannot, let's say, try to be compassionate of your enemy in a way that undermines that justice. And that implies that you're going to be using ideologues who are probably, let's say, not as Christian as you, or maybe not even Christian at all, but going with a movement, and that they will, in fact, make mistakes. And you're going to have to accept that, because what is the lesser of two evils? So from my perspective, it's a moment that we need to be maybe less reflective, in the sense of like overanalyzing too much, and I'm more supportive of whatever moves, let's say, whatever moves the Overton window over to our side. Because like we're merely starting to have, let's say, orthodoxy on the discussion. We're merely starting to articulate, let's say, more in-depth sociological perspectives about how power functions, about how Christians are supposed to even have a relationship with a state, how the state is supposed to function and let's say, curtail evil. And we are just like, do you know what the red, I don't know how you call it in English, the red circle? The red circle is a very small minority of people who are, let's say, the intellectual elites. The red circle might be, let's say, exploding right now, but the masses, like the 50% people that you need to move, like within a, let's say, democracy, like they're still pretty much normies who are laughing at Hitler memes. So it's like, okay, it's good that they're having that conversation, that they're able to notice, hey, there are people who are betraying us and who don't want the best for us. But the problem is, we're never going to be able to make a coalition stick if we're not able to let go of certain purisms that are like, oh no, this is not Orthodox enough, this is not Christian enough, or whatever. It's like, at some point, it's like, I'd rather embrace the anti-Semite who has nothing in his head, simply because like he's going to be able to help me get closer to a functional society. But maybe I'm mistaken about it. I don't know what you guys think.
Did you guys see the statement of Stephen Miller? I don't know if it was earlier this week or late last week, but he said that they are prioritizing visa applications for white Europeans fleeing Europe and white South Africans. That they apparently have the first position on visa application, so they'll be selected out of people who apply. Did you guys see this?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. So I think even though I'm very pessimistic about immigration and the deportations that are going on in America, I did find that, whether if it's just rhetoric or not, I did find that a bit refreshing. But there's kind of an elephant in the room that we need to address here, and it has to do with Ivan. I got bombarded last time we did an open panel and you weren't here, is that you apostatized from Orthodoxy?
Oh, that was very briefly. I stopped going to church for about a couple of weeks because I had like personal issues in regards to my faith. It coincided with a very visible public debate that I did. I went back to the church. I'm in good standing right now. At the same time, it's like I think it's a danger when you're, let's say, expressing publicly how you feel about the faith when you're visible or whatever. I hope I didn't mislead anyone. I kept up the video in which I was, let's say, in which I had that debate on my channel. If anybody wants to see it, it has a little bit of an unsavory feeling sometimes because I'm very critical of, let's say, the more namby-pamby side of Protestantism and how Christianity deals with aspects of things. It was related, I think, with a misunderstanding on my part of theology, besides my own like personal issues. And I would say that in terms of how I'm approaching the faith right now, is more of a moral aesthetic approach, beauty first approach, if you will, because I honestly I lost all my rationalistic zeal in terms of like debates. I don't even think that formal debates they're useful, obviously, but they're not able to, let's say, give you certainty in an intellectual sense. So in that regard, I think, like, if you have any other questions, like, I can answer.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I'm satisfied. So it sounds like you just kind of had you let the demons kind of take over, getting into debates. I mean, that's why I don't encourage. I think people watch Andrew or Jay, and a lot of people. I'm not talking about you specifically, Ivan, but it sounds like something similar occurred. But I've just seen so many people get so caught up in the debate sphere when they're really early in the faith, and it just causes problems. It's like you almost have to get the training wheels off and be in the church for a while. I'm not saying this specific. I don't know how long you've been Orthodox, Ivan. But I think once you're public and you start talking about stuff, that's why I always tell people, if you talk about like sins that you've conquered publicly, I guarantee you're going to be attacked with whatever that temptation is immediately, and you're going to struggle with it. So you have to be really careful, like when you speak publicly, whether the audience picks it up or not. Just spiritually, like there's forces at work that are real. You know, I've dealt with them. So
yeah, fair enough.
Anyways, Nutmeg Donkey throws in 10, says, hope you can make your trip, DPH. Thank you very much. Yeah, I want to get down to DebateCon. Sounds like it's going to be a really fun time. So appreciate the support, Nutmeg. God bless you and the family. All I know about Islam is we must retake Constantinople, and it's a war crime how ugly the Muslims have made Hagia Sophia. That is true. That is true. And Constantinople will be Orthodox again. Jack throws in 5. Looks like he's got a question for Jose. Jose, how did you know back in 2005 that politics will come down to being pro-PDF versus anti-PDF?
So the reason is because I grew up in New York. I grew up in Yonkers, just north of New York City. So I was what do you call it? Yeah, so I was exposed to, we'll say, the community at a very young age. And I'm not speaking about the small hat tribe. I'm talking about the deviant tribe. Or the deviant group, where essentially the thing that I recognized then, back when I was a teenager, was the fact that the community, as it were, they target young men, pederasty essentially. They target young men for what they call conversions, and so there are many individuals I knew who were targeted, and not in 2005, but later on, one of my brothers was actually targeted as well. And so it's a highly predatory community, a highly predatory lifestyle, especially of youth. And even St. John Chrysostom talks about how that's why that the sin this community commits is doubly worse than murder, because it literally it's not just killing the body, it's killing the body and the soul, and it's specifically killing the body and the soul of others. So when I was in 2005, I recognized that there was a huge push politically for the normalization, that essentially a huge push for normalizing the community, LGBT movement, essentially. That what that naturally entails is a normalization of how they recruit and how they grow. And so essentially, once that domino fell, essentially, okay, so now that this is now a political issue, once that becomes legal, then the fight's going to be over essentially access to the youth for conversion or converting purposes. And that is how I knew back in 2005 that all of American politics was going to come down to pro-pedophile versus anti-pedophile. That's going to be the defining issue, because that is an issue where there simply is no middle ground for, there is no moderate position on that. One is either for it or one is against it. And the fact that this alternative lifestyle, we'll call it, especially also, 2003 was it when Texas's laws against sodomy were struck down. That was all laying down the groundwork for this to be legalized at the federal level. So I could see that was coming inevitably, in 2005. And so I just put two and two together at that point, pattern recognition. And that's how I knew. And, what amazes me are, men who are far more intelligent than me, like Wang Hunin, who recognized it in 1989. That's what blew my mind. So it's just the fact is the reality is that you cannot separate sexual deviancy from predation on children. It's simply not possible. Right. And there was even a study. It wasn't J.D. Udwin's stuff, but it was another study. I forget what the name of the book was that the guy ended up writing on it. But essentially, it's any system of sexual morality that permits what Christianity would define as sexual degeneracy will logically permit the predation on children. Right. So that there's no way to get around it. Then this was written by a guy who's not Christian. He was just a secular dude who's trying to prove that essentially free love would have no negative impact on society and could be done without the inevitable decline into or have any moral system which permits free love. There must be one that permits free love, but also would logically condemn preying on children. And he couldn't. And he essentially definitively proved that there wasn't one. And he was actually quite disappointed in his finding. I got to find that study again. But
that gets back to my spiritual theory about occultism and magic and pedophilia and the taking away of innocence from children. We talked about Israel and what could be deemed as a sort of human sacrifice of the Palestinians, but we know that Israel is a safe haven for a lot of Jewish PDFs that have been found. One just happened 2 months ago in Colorado. Guy got caught in a sting, and the Colorado AG just lets him go. Apparently he went back to Israel. Now he's back in the United States, at least from posts that I was seeing on X. It's just unreal. Meanwhile, the other 11 people that were caught in that sting, they're all in jail. So it makes you think that there's certainly a spiritual element regarding the sexual deviation and the effect it has on the nuclear family and children specifically.
And I wanted to follow up on terms of the immigration stuff, just to get, so people want to know, what does a serious, to stem the tide of immigration, what does a serious effort look like? I would recommend looking just at the current day Dominican Republic. So their government's gotten really serious about kicking out illegals out of the Dominican Republic, especially with the Haitian illegals that were flooding over the border prior. And so they were exiling people at a rate of 23,000 people per month. So, in comparison, in 2024, the United States was They were deporting 5,100 a month. And the U.S. is far, far larger population with a far, far larger illegal population. So if you had an American government that was as serious as the Dominican Republic, and there's no reason why the U.S. government couldn't do this. It's just a matter of use of resources. If they were to use the same per capita amount of resources as the Dominican Republic currently is using, and mind you, the DR is a much poorer country than the United States on a per capita basis. The United States government is capable of deporting about 745,500 people a month. And they're not doing so because that is an active political decision to not do so.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit on the possibility or the infrastructure to deport that many? Because at least what Holman and some of the people in the Trump administration are claiming is they don't have the holding facilities for these people. They just aren't equipped logistically to getting that many people out of the country. You think otherwise?
No, the logistics currently does not exist, just as the logistics didn't exist for the DR at the beginning of 2024. They just built it out. Like you actually have to decide instead. Essentially, in the case of the
They're
United
able
States,
to do that in what, a year?
Yeah. The U.S. could get to that number in a year. Like in theory, if you redirected all these wasted funds and efforts going to, propping up a state in the Middle East, propping up a war that was already lost with Russia, propping up, all these government overthrows the U.S. has been funding, like the overthrow of Nepal recently, in order to get all these countries to, go to war with China in the future. If the federal government were to redirect those resources and use that to actually build holding facilities and build all the logistics needed, within 1 year, you could hit like almost nearly 750,000 people a month being deported. And that would actually be the absolute minimum to deport the illegal population, which I know the official number now is what they say the official number is now, like 21 million, something like that, or are they still using 13 million?
The official number last I saw was 21 million.
Yeah. So that's the 21 million. And then the larger part in terms of what is the threat of Islam, it's not war. The fundamental threat is immigration. The fact is, I mentioned him earlier, Martin Van Creveld, he had a phrase, immigration is war, except worse, because during war, the armies leave, whereas the immigrants stay. So the problem with the United States is, so you have this massive illegal population, but the bigger problem is you also have this massive legal population, like, the whole HEB1 visas that are flooding in from India. So you have this whole legal apparatus, and it's insufficient to just, if one was trying to save the American empire, it is insufficient to simply kick out the illegal population, which the the resources exist. They're just not being used for that purpose. They're being used for other purposes, for trying to expand or maintain the empire abroad. The other element is deporting all the legal, like essentially cracking down and deporting almost all of the illegal immigrant population that exists in the United States, plus reversing citizenship for those who've never bothered to Americanize. Because that's the other huge issue with the United States, especially like birthright citizenship. So if you have a population of people who are citizens but don't like have no loyalty to the greater nation that is of the United States,
right?
That is a perfect case for reversing citizenship.
Yeah, they should, and that's where it gets scary, because the pulling of people's visas for criticism of Israel. Yep. Like if it was a legitimate deportation and even a revoking of citizenship from people that are just antithetical to, whatever generic label you would give American values or, the project we're a part of, I would probably be in favor of that. What I worry about is how that could be weaponized in favor of the infrastructure that already exists in regard to the political elite to maintain their power. I feel like one of the optimisms that I've already mentioned with Gen Z and millennials is that it's already reached a tipping point where I just don't think you can convince them that all of a sudden they're going to be pro-Israel, and there's too many to deport. And it's the younger generation, which is necessary to maintain the country moving forward. So it's like they're caught between a rock and a hard place. It'd be different if it was like a boomer, if the demographics were reversed and it's all the boomers that hated Israel because they have the future, but they don't. So, and somebody that is very knowledgeable about the Tejanos as yourself, I was speaking with somebody recently that is from the DFW area, and they're living in the Midwest. And I asked them what they thought about the Midwest, and it was kind of a slight, I think, maybe a criticism, but one of the things they said is that the Midwest is very homogenous. This was, a white American man. And I thought, interesting. And he talked about some of the immigrant groups in a positive way. You mind speaking just from your experience as somebody who's very familiar with the Tejanos of how there's some nuance to be had here. And just because there are immigrant groups that seem to be hardworking, as to your point, it can tear the fabric of the sacred canopy that holds a nation together.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just know the thing to take into account is one. So Tejanos are not Mexican. They never were Mexican. So Mexico ruled them for about 2 decades. So if that makes one Mexican, then
well, and explain for those who don't know what a Tejano is. It's basically it's kind of a middle class. I mean, you say they're not Mexican, but that's kind of the label they're given, is like a Mexican American, middle class Mexican American identified with the United Latin America. What was the thing that they? You know what I'm talking about? I know you do.
But like the Chicano movement, or
yes, it was. What? Hold on, let me pull it up real quick.
The university chapters. Are you talking about that? MECHA.
Hold on. Oh, the United Latin American Citizens.
Okay.
League of United. That's what I was trying to talk about. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I personally don't know any Tejanos a member of that, but what do you call it? The thing is, so historically, so Tejanos usually got called Mexicans because Texas was annexed from Mexico,
right?
But in terms of the ethnos itself, so Tejanos are they were part of New Spain, but they actually had their own kingdom that was independent of the Kingdom of Mexico. So the Kingdom of Mexico was ruled by the descendants of the Aztec emperors, because they converted to Christianity, and they actually continued to rule. And today, like the heir of Moctezuma, he lives in Spain because they were exiled out of Spain or out of Mexico after the revolutions. So Tejas was its own kingdom. So it actually was a kingdom. The legal books of Texas today, Texas is unusual of all American states, as well as any state in the New World, because it still operates on the basis of imperial Spanish law. The foundation of Texan law is the Las Siete Partidas, which is essentially the Code of St. Justinian with commentary by Aquinas, one jurist from the University of Salamanca, whose name I always forget, and as well as excerpts from church fathers. So when the Americans settled into Texas, so you had the Tejano population that was there. They were not exactly, then several Tejanos actually fought alongside the Americans to be free of Mexico because they weren't fans of the Mexicans. Ironically, many were not fans of the Mexican government because it was the Mexican government which opened the borders for Americans to flood into Texas. So by the time of the Texas independence, your average Tejano found themselves outnumbered 10-1 by Americans. And in terms of like origin, so the Tejanos are descendants of Juan de Oñate. So Juan de Oñate established both New Mexico and Tejas, and they were separate states, and they are distinct peoples, but they're brothers, kind of the way like the Edomites and the Israelites were, back in the Old Testament. So the Tejano population is, in terms of where they are politically, historically, they never really voted much at all up until recently, and they only started voting in 2016. So I actually got to talk with a guy named Raul Reyes, who was one of the candidates back in 2020 for one of the House seats in South Texas. He was challenging Tony Gonzalez, and Tony Gonzalez, being a complete and total criminal, and also literally backed by millions of APAC money, totally slaughtered him in the primary. Essentially, Reyes was ahead by like 2,500 votes. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2,507 votes appeared that all were for Tony Gonzalez. So that's the Republican primaries of Texas, which, yes, they're rigged. And even in the Anglo parts of Texas, they're also rigged. But that's a different story. But the point is, Tejanos came out in mass in 2016 for the first time to start voting, and they voted for Trump. And you can look at the presidential election maps by county for 2016, 2020, and 2024. And you can lay over a map of how Hispanic a given county is. And literally, like, the Tejanos came out in mass to vote for Trump. And there are two reasons for that. One, because your average Tejano, as a rule, based on just all the ones that I've interacted with, they would like to have a caudillo. They're not exactly believers in democracy or republics, but they are a fan of caudillismo. So essentially, if you act like a strong man, they're going to like you. And that was Trump's appeal in 2016. The other aspect is they get because, for example, like Laredo is like 95%, 97% Tejano last time I checked. It's one of the safest states it's ranked in the top 10 safest states in the United States. It is homogenous, but not the way most people think of a homogenous American city. But the huge problem they have is all the cartel stuff nonsense coming up through the border. They get to suffer from the cartel nonsense first. And they also have all the floods and floods of illegal immigrants crossing over the borders, running through their ranches, etc., their towns, their cities, causing all sorts of problems. And Trump promised to kick them out. And ironically, it was that speech where Trump gets criticized for, being racist towards Mexicans. Well, that was the speech that actually resulted in him getting the Tejano vote in Texas. And it's hilarious to me because I've talked with like actual Democratic strategists for the Democratic Party of Texas back in the 2010s, back in Austin. And I was amazed at how they were they were saying like the Tejanos were these, an untapped population that they could use to make Texas vote Democrat forever. And I asked them, have you ever been outside of Austin? And they said, no. I'm like, okay, you should go pick a rural county that's like 90% plus Hispanic. Go there and just talk to people and tell me if they're actually going to vote Democrat. I mean, whatever. I live in a rural county in the middle of nowhere, which and what were the voting habits of the Tejanos around me? 75% of them voted for Trump in the last election. And one thing to take into account of that is they really do care a lot about immigration. But they don't want open borders, which is why Tejanos stayed home when George Bush was promising open borders immigration, because they don't want that. Anyway, is there anything specific you wanted me to talk about?
No. I was just talking about just a little bit of that because the point was that America is so multi-ethnic, multicultural, and I think there's to kind of slight the Midwest that it's too homogenous or it's kind of boring. Yeah, I mean that's like the reason I like it.
Yeah. Yep.
And
the thing is, Dallas-Fort Worth, that's northernmost Texas, so that was overwhelmingly Scotch-Irish settlement. You had almost no Hispanics north, like anywhere near that north, like north of Salado. You didn't really have anyone.
But now it's incredibly multicultural.
Correct. Yeah, Texas it's become way more diverse in terms of like sheer numbers, like Houston, for example. But in terms of like,
doesn't Houston have the largest Chinese population in the U.S.?
Yep, it does. And the thing with Texas is, so 70% of the Hispanics in Texas are Tejano. The other 30% are essentially the immigrants, descendants of immigrants, etc. So that's what makes Texas a little weird in terms of voting habits. And that's why when you have the Republicans saying like, oh, look, Hispanics are swinging towards the Republican Party, that's not what's happening. What's happening is, in the last 8 years is you have Tejanos, Nuevo Mexicanos as well shifted towards the Republican Party, and then the Cubans in Florida. Like those are the only three groups that have like genuinely had a massive shift over the last 8 years to the right. Over the last 4, you've had Puerto Rican men shifting, but not Puerto Rican women. But the thing is, like, the fact is, to this day, like your average, if you meet a Mexican, like a Mexican who's a Mexican American, who's, odds are 2 out of 3 they vote Democrat. And that hasn't really changed. So it's in terms of like, how does America function? How can America function when you have this, different groups or different minority groups within it? Honestly, I think the best solution is to look towards Russia and China and historical imperial China. I mean, there's a reason why, like in Russia, in the current conflict with Ukraine, you have the Buryats, the Yakuts, the Chechens, the Ingush, etc., who are volunteering and fighting for the Federation. And the fact is, these various people groups, when they were annexed by the Russian Federation, they were able to continue to live on in their own way of life. And they just paid fealty to the emperor. Like an example, like the Kalmyks, they're the one Buddhist people that live in Europe, on continental Europe. So they actually ran to the Tsar for protection from the Ottomans. And the Tsar was like, all right, I can get a bunch of really skilled light cav to fight for me in my war. Sure, that sounds great. And they've always had this essentially positive relationship between this Kalmyk minority and the Tsars. So, for example, like the legendary, the Battle of Poltava, where King Charles IX was defeated by Peter the Great. So most people know that as the turning point in that Swedish invasion, where in the case of Russian history, it's a significant note where the West was turned away yet again from their attempt to conquer Russia. But what I find hilarious is, after the initial battle was done and the Swedes were retreating, they found themselves being chased by thousands and thousands of Kalmyk light cavalry who were desperate to get the Swedes out as well. And the fact is, these Buddhists, they fought loyally to the Tsar. And some of them did become Orthodox, and I've met one who actually become Orthodox. But the Tsars never forced their subject states to convert to their religion. So the thing is, if you're going to be an empire, so Russia, the Tsar was an emperor. You got to figure out a way where you can have a mutually beneficial relationship with a specific minority group that's native to the soil. So that's why, like, if America was to hold together as an empire, its relationship with the Janos, for example, will be much different than with Mexicans, who have their own state, who have their own country, separate country, and have this divided loyalty. In the case of your average Tejano, they don't have any loyalty to Mexico because Mexico screwed them over, in particular, 200 years ago.
Right.
And it's totally doable for the United States to develop what I would call a generative imperial policy of like, okay, so like, this part of Tejanostan of Texas, y'all can function how you function. And ideally, that's how the United States was meant to function, as this federation where you had the most important power was the local political power. For example, like, South New Jersey at the time of the American Revolution wasn't English. It wasn't Anglo-Saxon. It was Swedish. Interestingly enough, those Swedes supported open borders immigration, and they got replaced. And they went to Minnesota, where they supported open borders immigration, and they're getting replaced by Somalis.
Right.
So I don't know what's with the Swedes on that, but they did that before. But that's an example. Like, ideally, you can have, ideally, the United States as an empire could have a positive relationship that's mutually beneficial for both the heritage American population and the group that they annexed. But that's not something.
Did you see that Mexico closed their borders and began their own deportations?
They did?
Yeah, that was news a week ago. Yeah, they were doing their own deportations just because the border was. Again, that was the article I read. It was because the U.S. southern border was so secure. There was a pooling of immigrants that were trying to get across that were arriving in northern Mexico, and Mexico decided they got to do their own deportations. They started kicking these people back across their southern border.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, one of the hot topics right now, and I even see people talking about it in the chat regarding like Paul Miller, Nick Fuentes. What do you guys think is happening culturally right now? I saw that Fuentes, he commented that he did not actually create the Spotify account, but somebody created a Spotify account as Nick Fuentes. And his podcast, I think they posted 3 or 4 episodes, and it shot up to like #1 on Spotify, surpassed Joe Rogan and whatever that sex talk podcast that some chick does, that Kamala Harris. I don't even remember what it's called, but apparently those are like the top podcasts in the U.S. Joe Rogan I knew of, but it just seems like the sentiments are changing. You could call it black fatigue. Crowder recently did an interview regarding black fatigue at a black barbershop. Did you guys catch any of those videos? You guys know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, Roscoe does. So basically, he started talking about the racial issues at a black barbershop in Texas. And I bring all it up, not that we need to dwell on, the interview that Crowder did or the discussion he had, but there is a real shift that's happening. I would say in really all the Western nations that are facing the immigration problem and the demographic collapse. You guys want to speak on what you think is happening? I've kind of talked about it before, but I'll share my thoughts after you guys are able to share yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the Steven Crowder, he posted part 2 recently, by the way.
I haven't seen part 2. I've only watched part 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I mean, he talks about how the whole sort of, I don't want to use boomer Republican terminology, but the whole wokeism project has sort of radicalized the youth towards the more rebellious position, which is America first. Even though I'm not American, I think of it more as a European identity issue. That's sort of the direction the pendulum is swinging in with equal force. There's nothing really contrarian, or there's nothing really cool about a young person being, a leftist, transgender. There's nothing virile, or
there's nothing edgy about it anymore.
There's nothing edgy about it, but also it's just like, even the people who did pursue those identities, they were deviants and autists to begin with. Like, right. People, when you look at the sort of, when you objectively measure what is attractive, what is aesthetic, part of that is, how like dimorphic or masculine or feminine a person is. These people are like, they're like gross. That doesn't look good. That's not a good optic That's not a good optical display for anybody young. That doesn't really appeal to natural man. That appeals to mentally ill people. And so when you see like bodybuilding, Orthodox Christian, and Nick Fuentes being bombastic and offending everybody in a way that's way more profound than, Steven Crowder setting up a Change My Mind booth, that's a much more attractive thing to the youth, even if it's just on the level of aesthetics, right? That's way more attractive than the sort of nerdy Republican stuff.
Right. No, it's definitely more attractive. I mean, clearly. And my point of bringing up Crowder was not to compare him with Fuentes, but to highlight the point that he was making, at least in part one. Like I said, I haven't seen part two. But in part one, he's telling these black guys that are all like pro George Floyd. Now they're not as bad as like black women, and so they'll call out some of the things. There's points of agreement, but the general tone of the barbershop is basically your general, pro BLM, black reparations. They're systematically oppressed, even though the guy's owning his own barbershop and is successful in conducting the interview. And Crowder's point over and over is like, do you guys understand what's happening in culture? Do you know like where the energy is? Do you know why so many young white men are kind of altering their mental position on a lot of different topics? And the landscape is very different than the sort of 1990s NAACP, framework of what America is. And they didn't seem to understand that. But something very, very real is going on regarding, you can call it race realism. I don't even think it's a supremacy thing. I know there's some like the Paul Miller. I'm not super familiar with his stuff. I think he's the one that dresses up as like Joker and does is it called Omegle? It's when you can go through different people. And from my understanding, those guys are like super anti-Christianity because they kind of view Christianity as like a cucking religion, and it's cucked the European from his like pagan identity and stuff like that. But race realism and being very self-conscious about what group you're a part of and wanting to preserve that or defend it. I mean, I think there's the racial conversation in America is totally different than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. I would say I have been joking about this with friends like Mr. Westford, like with Orthodox friends, like that we have to retake racism and like speak about it positively and distinguishing it from a bad kind of racism. Racism in the sense of like acknowledging that your history still lives in you, and that even if you're trying to get into, I don't know, the Orthodox Church, like you're still carrying baggage that is historical, and you're going to have to work through that. So there is a real ontological, let's say, being that has to do with your roots, and that those cannot be, let's say, cut. I was going to address what you were saying, Patrick, by mentioning. I don't know if you follow Sargon of Akkad, also known as Carl Benjamin.
I knew of him. I think I followed him back in like 2016, 17. But I'm not familiar with anything recently. You have to get me up to date.
He's pretty influential when it comes to, let's say, English politics.
But he's like a gospel liberal, right? And he's non-Christian.
Sort of. He's kind of in between. Like he's trying to find his footing, but at the same time, he has all of these liberal presuppositions. Like he's critical of the Enlightenment, but at the same time, he cannot break out of it. And I'm seeing this happen in real time, which is, I think, very interesting, because basically he wants to defend England and say stuff like England is for the English, like kind of more of an ethno-nationalist kind of idea, which is not inherently bad, right? But the problem is that if you don't do it with Christ, it will be for nothing. And like you said, he smuggles in a lot of, let's say, classical liberal presuppositions, because basically he's the embodiment of a reaction against, let's say, the clamping down that the woke did over regular people who just wanted to express, let's say, their opinions. And what we're seeing right now, in my perspective, is that there is a lot of confusion in terms of like where we want to get to, because people like Carl Benjamin, unfortunately, they would stop and they actually say this. They want people to have, let's say, freedom to associate politically without fear of persecution, right? And this kind of idea, in a sense, is kind of like a crypto liberalism. So he can speak all he wants about, let's say, ethno nationalism, but ultimately, what he's doing is basically justifying there being treason within a system. And this is, I think, a spiritual reality that we have to go back to in terms of, like, if you have a traditional society, there is only so much that you can say about the king. You cannot criticize the king beyond a certain point because that becomes treasonous in itself. And like we don't realize how much of the enlightenment is already coded within us, even as we are trying to become, let's say, more orthodox. Because let's put it this way: if you're an apprentice, you have to pay your master in labor, for example. There is this relationship of you, let's say, not cutting your own origins, you recognizing who's the one to decide what is a good work or not, right? And what these people do is, okay, they want to stay, they want to do the Peterson thing of defending the West without defending the root of what the West was about originally in its good sense. So we're caught in a confusion of people wanting to hold on to, let's say, an identity, but that identity not being rooted in Christ. And I see that tension is being played out right now because, of course, yes, we can recognize that there are some traitors, but traitors to what? What is the identity that you're supposed to be defending?
Right. Well, why do you think England in particular and the English people were so susceptible to this? It's one of the things I really don't have my finger on. I have a couple theories, but they don't have the same. They obviously had an empire, the British Empire, but they don't have the baggage of chattel slavery like the U.S. does. We're hit with all the time. But to allow the country to get to the point that it is it just like this? Is it kind of like an English pacifism until it got to like a threshold? Is it just their political structure is so difficult to have any sort of agency within as the English people? Why do you guys think England in particular and the English are kind of the epicenter and kind of the leading forefront of trying to reclaim their country? Although, just posting flags of, the Union Jack is like a controversial act in the UK right now.
Well, I mean, it's the project of the European Union. I mean, some of the people who were the sort of forebearers of the European Parliament, like Kalergi, that was the intention all along. It was to completely erode the borders to create a European superpower. And once you get the European superpower, you are geopolitically dominant. That is the United States of Europe sort of vision that they had.
Sure.
And in order to get there, there's certain religious and ethnic objectives that you need to accomplish in order to get there. And I think that a lot of these
why the English out of all the people? I mean, they had Brexit. They had a sort of national revival spirit by 2016. They don't have the same proximity to some of the North African countries like Spain and Italy does, or Greece.
They were
and from a recent poll that I saw online, the country with the it was just general population sentiment for mass deportations or anti-immigrant sentiments, and Greece was actually number one. I was really surprised, but Greece was number one. It was like 90% of their population is for deportations and against immigration. But in England, like I'm just kind of, why England? Why is England and in the UK? Why them out of all the nations? Because I get your point, Roscoe. That is the point of the EU. That is the point of the sort of larger political structure. But is it to punish the UK for Brexit?
I mean, the short answer is Fabians, and this was planned 100 years ago. But in terms of the Fabians, were not making headway on starting mass immigration into Britain until the sexual revolution. And fundamentally, like if you look at, for example, same thing with France. France is in a worse position than England in the sense of, sheer numbers of non-French living in France. Granted, the countryside of France is still French, or rather, Bretonian and Brittany, and Gasconese and Gascon, etc. But the what do you call it? Yeah. So the chief issue is like once you no longer have sexual boundaries being enforced, that literally corrupts all of society. It removes the foundation of a strong state, which is, in the words of Tsar Alexander III, is the family unit. And once you have that, then there's no one's going to be enforcing political borders. And that's just so Britain has a ruling class elite that is backed by an oligarchic banking class elite who have wanted for more than a century to replace all of England with Muslims. And the English people simply do not have, they vote for Brexit and what have you. They simply do not have the spiritual power needed to actually rein in the demonic Fabians that rule over them.
Well,
you think the will of the English people is just diminished compared to others? Definitely.
I mean, just look at the whole concept of the hard R gangs running around. And sure, they do target fatherless girls, but the sheer amount of girls who are fatherless in England is just absolutely astounding.
Well, and but that gets to my point. Even with the Pakistani gangs that went around, assaulting English girls, which was over 1,000 different girls, it was the local police that covered it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that just blows my mind, the lack of, especially for a European nation, because race is different in America. It's a totally different context and conversation. But in Europe, what does it mean to be British is pretty clear. What does it mean to be German is pretty clear. The fact that their own British girls are being barred and raped, and they go to cover it up based on multiculturalism and not to be perceived as racist. That's what's like, what? How do the British get there when they don't, at least with the American context, we're told we're nasty, slave owners, even though that was a very minority of the South who actually owned slaves. But okay, that history exists in America. I mean, other than, the East India Company, maybe you can talk about some of how the empire worked. But why are the English so cuffed? I don't get it. Is it? I saw somebody in the chat said they believe it has to do with the erosion of the power of the monarchy. But is the royal family, are they like super pro-English? I mean, I'm not even sure.
They're German.
It's the education system. And like, you're asking how this penetrated their minds. I mean, they're taught it in their schools just like every other Western country.
But why are not all the same Western countries? Why were they not as susceptible as it seemed like the English were?
Well, well, you say that we're dirty slave owners, or you guys are dirty slave owners in America, but they're dirty colonialists. These Indians are just moving from one part of the British Empire to the next. Not
exactly. It's
the empire.
It's deeper than that. So, like, take for example, like Spain. So why is Spain? I mean, Spain has got serious problems, but like the thing is, they're behind they're behind France and England, and the reason is because they had what's his name? Help me out, Ivan. The dictator, World War II through the 1970s.
Franco.
Thank you. They had Franco. So, and then the king that he tried to hand off power to completely cucked and handed it over to essentially American rule. But the thing is, Spain, that was Franco and Salazar for Portugal were essentially stopgap measures who prevent or stop the decay for a couple decades. And then the decay started up back again. England has not had, nor has France had, someone who stopped the decay for 3-4 decades. That's the distinct difference if you're comparing Western nations.
But you look at it, it seems like the sentiments, for example, the Dutch between the English is very different. Very, a lot of overlap. Similar geography, although not the exact same. But even though Geert Wilders is very much a Zionist, I mean, the public statements regarding Islam in the Netherlands compared to England is just totally different by the ruling establishment. Like, that's what I was kind of getting at. I was surprised by the Swedes, how willing the Swedes are to keep importing with all the problems. They have no-go cities within Sweden, and they're still importing people. In Germany, given that my wife's German, I'm very familiar, more and more familiar with like German culture. It seems like the German youth are very much like the American youth right now. Like, the same phenomenon is happening, which again, now think of what the memes they're playing off of, and that's real history there. Like it's but the English, I mean, recently watched a guy he's kind of like a Paul Joseph Watson type. I don't even know his name, but he does like street interviews. And I was blown away by how many white English people were reluctant to even say what an English person was. And I think to what is an American, I think that's a little bit more complex. I think to Roscoe's point, you could go to the heritage American, English identity, everything else was hyphenated. But since then, I think the conversation of what is American is more nuanced. But what is a German? What is a British person? What is it to be Irish? Those are pretty clear cut.
Yeah. If I may chime in, I think that the issue has to do with, of course, colonialism, of course, the fact that the Enlightenment was mostly was the most successful, I would say, in England than in any other place in the world. And also, like they had the history of Magna Carta. So, like the English temperament, like the real Englishman of today, is a classical liberal by temperament. So the idea that you have this like rootedness is completely undermined constantly in their rhetoric when you hear them speak, because they say, "Oh, in England, like there is no such thing as an English person, because you've got Celts, you've got Anglo Saxons, because you've got the Norman invasions, because you've got Vikings," which is bullshit ultimately, because what the ethno nationalists want to defend is an idea that like that group of people settled on certain good ideas, and that those good ideas are worth defending over, let's say, the immigrants. But the problem is that the farther away you get from orthodoxy, the less those kinds of let's say political solutions can hold in society itself. So my speculation is that the moment that you have a person that says, I'm not gonna pay taxes to the king because I'm going to do my own thing, while at the same time free riding on the security that the king offers, that creates a liberal individualist subject. What you have is the British people are the most modern people in the world in the way that they think. They don't think about, let's say, the costs of ideas. If they did, they would have no problem persecuting people, let's say, who have a different set of ideas without using
If
a
you speak
leftist
out on
approach.
social media, I mean, how many thousands of arrests do they have because they say things on social media? So that
Ex-
that
ex-
that sentiment is clearly there. It's against the directionality that you would support, but
Exactly.
that's what I mean. Compare the Irish and the English. Like the Irish, I just watched a video where they had the police held hostage because they burnt down another migrant building, and they were actually doing checks while all the cars went by. They would check if there was any migrant. If you're Irish, you're on your way. If you're a migrant, like they were pulling people out of their cars. My point is, look at how the Irish are reacting to it. Look at how the English are being dominated by it. And their major act of resistance as of late is just putting up national flags. Not that
Yeah.
that's a bad thing. I'm saying they're doing what they can. But my point is, like, just doing that, you're getting like PMs like the Indian guy last week that's like telling people, hey, I know we fly the flag at football games, but we got to tone it down here. You're making people feel unsafe. Feel unsafe. That's literally the flag of the nation. What are you talking about?
Exactly, Patrick. You brought up the perfect case, because like here you have this Indian guy telling British people what a real British people is like. Well, real British person is like, right? Right. So you have this dude who's clearly Indian, who has the goal to tell British people not to put on their own flags because it's unpatriotic. Like, it's insane that people would let that happen. Like, what I'm saying is only a liberal person can be fine with that and not see a problem with that. There is clearly a problem with that. But the liberal subject cannot even notice that there's a problem with that because it's racist or whatever. It's like, you're brainwashed. What can I say?
Hey, Blake, welcome to the panel, brother. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I completely agree with what everybody's saying so far.
Okay.
I come from like a bit of a different perspective because I know like probably most of the people here don't like Israel, but I actually support Israel.
Interesting. Okay.
But I
No,
do
tell us
completely
why you
agree.
support Israel. I mean, that's kind of more on the open panel topic. Why do you support Israel?
So I support it because not so much because of like any dispensational thing. It's more like a strictly strategical like alliance. I could actually make a case if you like to hear it.
Yeah, I
And
would like.
maybe you guys could like scrutinize it.
Sure.
So I think that everyone should support Israel, and it's because we have a great and necessary alliance with Israel. You know, they give us like unparalleled intelligence, and this isn't just this isn't theoretical. That they tipped us off on Iranian nuclear plots, and they foiled attacks on American soil. Including the 2010 cargo plane bomb plot. We have like the Abraham Accords, which created an anti-Iran allegiance that secures shipping lanes and energy flows, which then helps oil shocks that could spike U.S. gas prices. Everyone likes to complain about gas prices, so like, what do you guys think of what I'm saying?
Sounds like so the chat thinks you're trolling and you're using a voice modulator. Are you using a voice modulator? Is this your real voice?
Yeah, I am using a voice changer just to help conceal my identity.
Okay. And you legitimately feel that Israel supplies the United States with intelligence advantages through Mossad?
Yes. Yeah.
Like Epstein, for example.
Like the intelligence that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in 2003.
Can you say that again? Sorry, I missed that.
Like the intelligence that Israel supplied in 2003 that, Saddam Hussein supposedly had weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist.
I haven't heard about that.
What?
You haven't heard about? Come on, dude, you're trolling, man. This is a troll.
What do you think about when Israel sold like weapon technology to China from America?
When was that? What are you referring to?
I can look it up for you.
Well, Israel is kind of notorious that behind China, they're like the second nation that steals the most intellectual property from the United States.
This was in 2000, it looks like. Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah, that dude was trolling. There's no way that guy was real.
Yeah, because I was just looking up list of things that Israel sold to China. So that include the schematics for the Python air-to-air missile, as well as the U.S. Sparrow missile, as well as tons of our jet fighters, tanks, radar systems. Yeah, I
was hoping it was legitimate. I want like a pro-Israel guy to come on, and I'll even be cordial with him.
Yep.
But once I heard his voice and I was with the chat, I was like, "That's not his real voice."
Yep.
And then,
if you want an overview of Israel's strategic advantage for America, look no further than John Mearsheimer's "The Israel Lobby."
John Mearsheimer's great.
The overview of how this view that Israel has been of a strategic advantage to America during the course of the Cold War is just totally ridiculous. There's Arabs had a positive impression of America as like a non-invasive entity in the Middle East. They viewed them as more isolationist, a non-imperial power. But we just had to ruin that for this tiny state the size of New Jersey, right?
Yeah,
we could have had much greater alliances with the sort of native Arab populations, but gave it away to Baal worshippers.
Well, the thing is, the U.S. doesn't even need the Middle East. I mean, the U.S. could just mend relationships with Venezuela, and all the oil needs are just, well, actually, right. The U.S. doesn't even need Venezuela to satisfy its oil needs. But the U.S. can just focus on the New World and be the big dog in the New World.
Exactly. But clearly, people that operate at the highest levels have some type of obsession. And I think it's more than just, the current state of Israel and Palestine. As you pointed out, the Greater Israel Project, I think this has to do with like a massive spiritual warfare that is happening about reconquering the Holy Land, and inverting it into a demonic, false, messianic savior. And so I think I'm totally with you, Jose. It makes no economic or military or logistical sense for the U.S. to be constantly involved in the Middle East. I mean, we should just secure the Western Hemisphere. We should normalize relationship. Again, it sounds like Trump's going whole hog towards Venezuela and wanting to go to war with Maduro. And it just makes no sense. But to me, the only thing that makes sense is that this is about a deeper spiritual reality, whether it's these spirits are possessing individuals, which is something I believe is very possible and currently happening, or just an obsession with taking over like this ancient piece of land and making sure it's Jewish.
Mm-hmm. That's the crazy thing too, because it's sheer nonsense. The elites' conception they have of their ability to project power, and I mean you can see in terms of their approaches to negotiation. So, for example, whoa, I got feedback coming on my thing. Sorry, let me fix this thing. Okay, now it's working. All right. So for example, like negotiating, Alexander Mercuris of the Duran had a very good observation that essentially the West, all their leadership gets together and they negotiate with each other what they want. And then they present those as demands to be it the Russians or the Iranians or whoever. And then they're shocked that the other side is like, no, we're just not going to go with that at all. And then you see this with the issue of the U.S. Army or the U.S. military. They had reports that was released concerning the amount of equipment they actually have that is maintained and in good order. And the United States has fewer military vehicles in working order than all of the cartels in Mexico combined.
What?
So it's it's so pathetic. It's like, there's certain vehicle classes where for the last 10 years, not a single platoon had all their vehicles in working order. And there are a lot of military retired guys out here, and they'll complain about the Bradley systems. And the crazy, because two of them were Bradley guys. They one was actually drove them, and the other was a maintenance guy on them. And it's interesting because I told them the things that I heard from the Ukrainian stuff was the Bradley system was the only weapon system the U.S. sent that actually worked on the battlefield. And they said, yeah, it works, but they were telling me about how much of a nightmare it was to keep it working. The U.S. military has not done the homework or the groundwork preparation that it needs to have weapon systems that actually function in actual real military conflict. And so if you do not have a military that can function in a real military conflict, then your soft power is meaningless. And that's why I'm very interested about this potential invasion of Venezuela, because it could be the Syracuse expedition that Athens did back during way back when they destroyed their own empire by invading Syracuse. It'll be interesting because the U.S. military has not been in more shambles than in its entire history, and it'll be a good test to see how competent is the bus driver ruling Venezuela actually is, because you've never had a weaker America try to get involved in Venezuelan internal affairs.
Right.
Like Venezuela had a right-wing military dictator up until I think it was 1957 when the U.S. kicked him out in order to put in a socialist, because for some reason the Eisenhower administration wanted a socialist in power. It's, what do you call it? I'm just amazed. I'm amazed. Anyway, for me, it'll be interesting because the other part too is I was there in Colombia back in 2008, 2007 when the U.S. was trying to get Colombia to go to war with Venezuela, and thankfully Colombia did not do so, because the Venezuelans are essentially brothers. They're literally like closer than brothers to Colombians in terms of like history. Like there is animosity and stuff over political issues and border issues and immigration issues, but historically, Colombia and Venezuela have gotten along pretty well for most of the last 200 years, Yeah, I just find it crazy because like the U.S. doesn't even need to go to war with Venezuela. Like I don't understand what their exact target is in that regard.
From last I heard from the Trump administration, it's because China and Russia had sent military equipment to Venezuela.
Mhm.
And so they see it, again, this is their framing of the situation, is they see it as a military threat to the future of the United States because of their proximity. So that is their argument. Now, the other argument is that wasn't there recently a mineral find in Venezuela that was like worth of trillions of dollars, and this is in addition to the oil. It's not just the oil. It's and I'm blanking on the particular mineral that they discovered.
Yeah, I believe it. It's interesting. If that's the case, the sad part is it was the U.S. that created the problem in the first place by essentially deciding to turn Venezuela into a pariah and trying to bully it around. Like, sure, like a lot of people, the guy before Maduro, far from exactly competent. Chavez essentially de facto destroyed the nation. But the fact is, you didn't need to be hostile to him. You could just let him destroy, Venezuela, and then let the Venezuelan people handle it themselves and, self-correct the nation. But instead, the United States, by essentially by presenting itself as a, external outside threat, it's enabling incompetent men like Chavez to last as long as he did. That's the thing too. Like, I look at it like, and I know another example, like the U.S. tried to overthrow Ortega back during the COVID shutdowns and everything, and that failed. I know Russia was sending equipment to Nicaragua, but the reason why Nicaragua is reaching out, or Venezuela is reaching out to Russia, to China, etc., is because the U.S. has decided to be hostile to those states to begin with. So it's an issue of the empire has a habit of creating enemies where it doesn't need to have one.
Right. So Blake, you joined us back. Are you trolling, bro? Are you legitimately pro-Israel? Because with the voice modulator, I mean, it sounds like this is a troll. Hello, Blake.
No, I know I'm serious. I'm just, but at the same time, I'm always willing to learn, and I just wanted to see like what you guys thought of what I was saying.
Well, how have you never heard of weapons of mass destruction and Netanyahu coming before, the Senate, the Congress, and telling them that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, which we now know in hindsight was a lie? For some of the instances that you're pulling up, one of the reasons why I think you're a troll is because you would certainly have been aware of that with the specificity of the instances you mentioned.
Well, I'm always learning, like I said. There's also the fact that we get a lot of economic opportunity from our relationship with Israel.
How?
Well, just like one figure that I know off the top of my head is we've gotten like, I think it was like around 14 billion last year in revenue from exports to Israel. That's quite a big number right there. And you can look this up too. I believe it's on like some government site has it, but that's I don't think they can argue against that.
So, what are your thoughts about the Jewish NGOs behind mass immigration, AIPAC's stranglehold on U.S. politics? You think these are good things? You think that the only foreign lobbyist group that isn't forced to register as a foreign agent has an incredible influence amongst both Republicans and Democratic candidates?
I understand how that could be like suspicious, but I don't see like an issue of Israel trying to argue on its behalf.
What? You don't think AIPAC argues on behalf of Israel? That's literally the point of it being a lobbyist group.
I know it argues on, but I'm just saying I don't see the issue with like Israel, trying to appeal to like the U.S. government.
Well, they should as a foreign lobby, though. I mean, just like every other country that has a lobbyist group to try to influence the U.S. government, they have to register as a foreign agent.
Sure, Sure, that's and that's something that you can. That's definitely like a valid argument, um, but like still, it's like the 14 billion in revenue. That's a huge boon for the U.S. economy.
No, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to interrupt here. Uh, the figure you mentioned has to be put in context. Israel is the 24th largest trade partner. The 24th. Before them is Indonesia. Before them is Malaysia. Like
Probably
it's
Singapore too.
yeah, exactly. It's like you're talking about like I don't know, a couple of dimes. Like why should the US defend such a unprofitable outpost?
And I mean, Blake, I mean, if it wasn't for Netanyahu, would we have spent the trillions of dollars we did in the Middle East and the war in Iraq? I mean, that certainly is not an economic boom for our allyship with Israel.
And just in terms of raw numbers, so like you mentioned, 14 billion in revenue with from exports to Israel last year. But last year, what the U.S. gave 16 billion, more than that to Israel.
Yeah, so that's a net loss.
And then you have the issue of what was the value of trade with Russia? That was worth 36 billion, and the U.S. threw that away for its desire to destroy Russia. So if Israel suddenly an important ally at 14 billion a year in revenue, export revenue, then Russia is literally almost 3 times as valuable as Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, how close have you been following the Israeli?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I mean, Blake, you do agree that is okay? All right. I think this guy's a troll. I'm not letting him back in anymore. This is very, very low tier defensive Israel. I mean, can we just get like a quality pro-Israel guy on the panel here? It's really I gotta do
okay.
People
should I try? Because I actually do have one based on the fact that Israel sold cruise missiles to Russia in 2021, not Russia, China in 2021. So this is my case for why Israel is a good ally to the United States, because it's handing over all this technology for just literally pennies on the dollar to China. This enables China to train their air defense systems on Americans' missile systems, which means that China's air defenses will already be trained to essentially lock down and knock out any attack America will make on China, making attack on China that much more difficult for the United States. So it cripples the American elite's ability to go to war with China that they want to do. And crippling the American elite's ability to go to war with China benefits the American citizenry, who won't have to get drafted in such a war or pay such taxes.
But it also
that is my short argument for
it allows the U.S. military industrial complex to focus its effort in the Middle East for their projects.
Exactly. But yeah, the difference is war with China would be death for the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Death.
Well, even Hex has recognized that every wargaming they've done for a potential war with China leads to China winning.
Yep. And that's the thing. Every war game since 2002, when they ran the war games to war with Iran, Iran wins every single time. So it's and China's a far, far bigger dog than Iran.
Yeah. Let's see. Pro Zilch throws in 10, says, the closer you get to the source of truth, the more the enemy attacks you on all fronts. That was a reference to some of Ivan's struggles previously. So yes, whenever you start speaking truth, that's why I say all this public stuff, it actually makes you a vector for attack. It's not as peaceful as you may imagine. Mr. Fista gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Mr. Fista. Really appreciate your support, brother. And Austin DeTulio throws in 10, says, I come back from Vespers and you people didn't pay your taxes? Shame. Exactly. People aren't even tithing to the Church of the Eternal Logos anymore, guys. I mean, I don't even know how you call yourself parishioners anymore. Suck Duck 5915 throws in 2, says, don't forget we give them money to buy our own guns. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what Jose was highlighting is, yeah, we gave him 16 billion. Again, I'm skeptical of how Israel makes $14 billion for the U.S. taxpayer. I'm very skeptical about that. But it's a net negative no matter how you run the numbers. I mean, this is not a beneficial relationship. And so Thomas 777-803 throws in $10, says, "Are we sure that wasn't Ben Shapiro or Netanyahu with a voice modulator? Also, here's some dosh for DebateCon." Well, thank you very much, Thomas. Do appreciate it. God
slow
bless
of a
you.
speaker to be Ben Shapiro.
Huh?
Too slow of a speaker to be Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. Denmark Andy, welcome, brother. Are you pro-Israel?
What do you mean? I'm Jewish. Shalom.
Oh, come on, really?
No, I'm not. I'm from Denmark.
Well, that's what I thought. It says Denmark Andy.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, are you? What is your opinion on the topic of Israel, Gaza, Palestine?
I don't know. I thought it was over, man. But it's always gonna be. I think I'm a Christian man, but yeah, like it says in the Bible, at some point it's gonna be like 500 million men fighting over there at these places, these mountains, and these fights are gonna like be the end.
What kind of Christian are you?
I'm a Protestant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you
And-
Danish Lutheran?
Huh?
Are you Danish Lutheran, like a traditional Danish Lutheran, or what kind of Protestant?
No, I don't know. But I'm going to like a free church. It's called like not a
Got it.
normal church.
Do you have a
Nothing
woman
extreme or anything. I've been in a what is called like a brotherhood or whatever, but like I'm just reading my own things now, my own Bible, and trying to find Jesus, you know.
Fair
So
enough.
that would be,
Man.
in the American experience, that would be called nonconformist Protestantism back in the 19th century. I was just asking because my grandmother was a half Dane, so she was raised in the Danish Lutheran Church. So she was essentially a de facto Catholic in protest, or Catholic elite, as some of my friends would refer to her as.
Andy, are you pro-Israel? Andy, are you pro-Israel?
Well, what does that mean, pro-Israel?
Do you support Israel in regards to
Oh,
their conflicts
well,
with
I know.
Gaza?
Never been there, and I don't really believe they have a country. If they believe that Israel or what is called Palestine is not a country, I think it's all bullshit. Like it's like doesn't make any sense, you know. For me at
Israel
least.
doesn't make sense as a country.
Nah, it's like it's a free world, you know. For me, so I don't think nobody should come there and take other people's country to say and claim that's theirs, you know. And like we are, like I know about Second World War, you know, and it's a big thing over here too. And all these Jews migrated over there and kind of took over Israel after the war, you know. I don't think it's fair. I don't know. I don't know shit about it. I've never been there.
Okay.
I don't know any Jewish people. Like I don't know, but like it's. I think war is terrible, you know, really bad.
Word. Suck Duck threw in another 5, said also Florida made it illegal for local governments not to buy Israeli junk bonds. Yeah, didn't Texas do the same thing, Jose?
Possibly. I know what they did. I know what did happen. There's a law in the books where you cannot boycott any Israeli company or the country of Israel. What makes it very interesting is that the company that has a monopoly on all of the what do you call it, the hormones and stuff for transitions, that is an Israeli company. So in the state of Texas, it is illegal to boycott the pharmaceutical company, which is making all of the material needed for chemical transitioning.
I'm not surprised. That's what was disappointing. It was during the Gab controversy where they did the, Governor Abbott signed the document about anti-Semitic hate speech in Texas, and then I saw the BDS legislation, and Texas and Florida are kind of held as the beacons of American freedom, right? But at the same time, they're like the two most Israeli cucked states, and my state too, Indiana, is very much pro-Zionist by the establishment GOP. So yeah, it's pretty sad situation. Of course, then the Trump administration was trying to make this federal, which didn't that eventually get struck down? They were trying to make a federal. Yeah, they were trying to make it federal, that the BDS legislation, essentially that no one in the United States could boycott Israel, but that I thought the Supreme Court or a judge in one of the circuit courts shot it down because it violated states' autonomy. So
I don't know. I don't remember.
okay.
I know since we have a Dane here, I mean, we touched on immigration. I just wanted to ask because I know your Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. She gets elected under the basis of restricting immigration, but then the foreign population in Denmark increases by like 20% under her tenure.
Nah, but it's not really that simple, you know. Like she was just one more part of it, you know. But like she's been elected like for a few years now, but been in power for more years now, like 4 years, I think. But nah, she's not like anything
Mm-hmm. Is there any like
worse or better? She's just like another puppet, you know.
Mm-hmm. Is there any real like who would be the real opposition to mass immigration into Denmark? Because I mean, clearly, if the foreign population increases by 20% in 4 years, she's not any real opposition to the Kalergi plan.
Yeah, and I saw a video out of Copenhagen, and there was just like Muslims everywhere.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same, and it is the same like everywhere else in Scandinavia. We're a small country, but we took a lot of people in, not worse than like Sweden, but like a little bit over Germany probably in our size of country, you know, to say. So, but I'm born in the ghetto. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't fear my God. And as long as they show respect to me and love, I don't have any hate towards them, you know.
So you're okay
it's
with
a big problem. They're coming over here. They don't come back when the country is fine again. I don't understand that. Like, that's
well, it's
bullshit,
because
you know?
they're coming to take your country over, brother.
Yep.
Yeah, but like, where are you from, bro?
America.
Yeah. What about your country? It's always been taken over by a lot. Like, you probably not even from there in your like DNA, you know. Like, you're probably Irish or some shit.
He's
a leprechaun. I don't know, bro. But
Yeah, well,
what does that have to do with
you're not an Indian.
conquest
They
of
have
Europe?
a lot to say. Like, all the black people over there. What the fuck are you scared of?
okay.
I'm not scared.
Okay,
I'm not from the ghetto. Okay, I grew up in the ghetto. for 10
The
years.
ghetto.
The
I
Danish
know
ghetto.
80 different nationalities, and I respect them all as they respect me. Either I play with them or they play with me. Okay, that's how it was for me. It was a tough life, you know, growing up over here in the ghetto. But I understood a lot, and I still understand a lot. I don't fucking hate, bro, and I try to understand. And yeah, a lot of these people, they should go back to their own country now. It's safe over there. And yeah, now we're starting tightening up, you know, because we can see all the problems with criminality and all that, you know. But like sitting in here and talking like you know everything, and you never seen a black man in the eyes, you know, like, you know,
I've never seen a
Willie
black
being
man.
out on the street, probably like Willie
never
like
been on the
fighting. I don't fucking know, bro, but it sounds like you're scared of something, you know. I don't know.
Scared of something.
I don't know.
No,
You ask me
no.
stupid questions, you know.
No,
I'm not scared of nobody,
You know, the
bro.
American
And no
perception
Christians,
of
but
Europe,
like, yeah.
Europeans, especially some of the Scandinavian countries, is that you guys have lost your entire will to fight, and that you guys have been cucked. And you know, the countries, based on the demographics moving forward, is you guys are going to be Muslim, and you're going to be ruled by the immigrants you brought in.
Bro,
And America is a different concept because it's a post-enlightenment project.
what are you, bro? I think I don't know what you're saying.
What does that have to do with Denmark? What does it?
Andy, may I chime in? I think what you're trying to articulate, but it's not coming through, is the idea that Americans are somehow illegitimately in their own country. And let me tell you this. The idea that a certain people has no right to be in some place that they control is ridiculous. You can say, oh, but you're just a colonialist or whatever. Done deal. It's happened. What's happened's happened. So when you have a society, your job as part of that society is to protect that society.
But you're not a colonist. What are you
No,
talking about? There's so many different people over there in America.
Listen.
I listen.
So what Patrick was trying to tell you was what's going on with Denmark, that you are allowing anybody to come in and
You see
change
your
your
country
whole rules
or
for them.
America? Nah, bro. You just like, you're not seeing what's going on in America. I think in one street,
aware what's
at
going on.
least there is more black people than there's white people over there. Or we can say
There's
Indian
not.
or Muslims. What are you
No,
talking
there's
about?
not.
We're talking about
We,
white
we, we have
How many
white
supremacy.
black-
we have
what's the
white
percentage
streets
of
over
black
here. You don't
people
have
in the
any
United
white
States?
streets over there.
What's the percent?
Nowhere.
Hey,
Nowhere you can go without seeing
what's the
another
percentage
color
of
or a
African
Muslim.
American
You're a
population?
Muslim country. You are a
What's the
Muslim
percent,
country.
bro? Just listen.
Yeah, I don't know what
You're
you're talking
ignorant
about.
on everything. What's the percentage of
No,
black people in the United States?
I don't fucking know, bro. But
So
everybody.
you don't even
I
know.
was-
It's
I think
13%.
it's 50-50, man.
13% of the United States.
It's
You're
not
all
50-50.
50-50, man.
They're
Your
less than
mom probably
50%.
bangs them also. Like, I don't know, bro. I don't give a fuck also.
You're
But it's
imagining
like,
we're talking
what are you
about
talking about?
Denmark and you have no idea about America.
And you have
You
no
make
idea about
comments
Denmark.
about race.
And you're
Oh,
talking about
trust me, my
Denmark and
grandma told me a
Israel
lot
and
about
shit.
Denmark.
You don't know shit about Denmark or Israel. Like, what are you talking about? Go read your books, schoolboy. Yeah, I'm the new guy. I'm the blood.
Andy?
Are you proud of looking ignorant?
What?
You don't even have guns, bro.
Better. Yeah, we
I
do.
actually got
We got a
guns.
lot of guns. What do you
I
mean? I
actually
got more
got
guns than you. I got
You don't
more
have
guns than you.
What
Of
do you
course
have?
we do. What do you
have
mean? We can
tanks,
have it.
knives.
We're gonna have a pump gun. We can have a Glock in our house. No problem.
You don't have a Glock.
Yeah, boy. You can go to shooting
don't have
club
a Glock.
and you can get a
You don't have
permit
a Glock.
after 4
You don't
years.
have-
And yeah, you can do that.
What
No,
ammunition does
I'm
a
not
Glock
saying
take?
I got it, but
What
you can
round
have it in
ammunition
Denmark.
does a Glock
No
have?
problem. No problem.
What
Glocks and
round
pump
ammunition?
guns.
What type of ammunition does a Glock use?
A 9mm.
Okay, at least you got that right.
Well, I'm not fucking retarded. I'm an older criminal, you know. I got this shit when I was 14 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Fuck,
not
man.
impressed. Not
You
impressed.
shouldn't be. Great, what this chat is fucking gay, man. What the fuck? They're all Muslims. I
You
think.
joined my stream, brother.
You should go look at my stream, man. That's some real shit. That's some real.
All right, man.
God bless.
God bless him. God bless
Yeah.
him.
You know, I'm
I was just
grateful
trying to
my great-
stimulate conversation.
Yeah. I was going to say I'm grateful that my great granddaddy got kicked out of Denmark. So
Oh man. All right. Well, there we are. So it looks like we had a couple of final super chats come in. Robert Ryanson throws in $2, says docu recommendation Mouthy Buddha Pizzagate 1 through 3. I did watch that. What was back in the day? What was that? 2000. Wasn't that made in like 2017, 2018? I remember watching that. Mouthy Buddha doesn't even make content anymore. Octavian throws in $10, says Andy's street name is Abdul. Oh gosh. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap things up there. We had a super chat over on the Dono chat. Major shout out to BJ Ryan 69. Says safe travels, DPH. Thank you so much, brother, for the support. And I don't think anything came through on Streamlabs, but anyways, any final comments from you guys about today's comment or anything we discussed before closing up shop here?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say, I think it's tangential perhaps to what was discussed about the relationship between the US and Israel, but in the sense of like distinguishing between what's part of your identity or what's not, it's like we have to start to make the argument that religion is actually, and this is a medieval argument, by the way, like that religion allows you to have a civilization, right? That religion is actually necessary for you to have a society. And from that perspective, that you have to start to tell people, look, we're going to have a religion whether you want it or not, and that religion will be codified into law, and we're not going to have you be free riding on the benefits of our religion. You don't have to come to church if you don't want to, but you're going to have to respect some laws, and the state has to make sure that you're not free riding on other people's seal. So, like any society will naturally try to, let's say, monitor who's part of the, let's say, part of the identity and who's working against it. And traitors have to be excised. Like excommunion is important as well. Like every identity wants you to be integrated to it if you respect its laws, if you respect its spiritual principles. The problem is we're in a liberal landscape where we have people who have a different, let's say, religious allegiances, like the Israelites, who are trying to, let's say, muddle the conversation and confuse us and have us think that it's actually in our interest to defend their interests. So
Well, to
maybe
your point, Ivan, it's been one of the things that we've been talking about in some of our think tanks at the Logos Academy is, the multicultural project is one thing regards to multiple ethnicities living together. They have to have the same language. They have to have the same culture they've assimilated to. But in addition to that, it's not that somebody that's non-Christian couldn't be here, but there has to be like an explicit recognition of like the religious orientation of a nation. And I think that's the unspoken part of the problems with multiculturalism is, obviously there's, at least from some of the Christian nationalists that I've seen, some of them are very, Protestant. I get the sentiment that they're going, and certainly I would be in favor of fusing a national identity with religion. I think that's the only way out. So the point that you make, I think, is really apropos, is the only way to save some of these Western nations is to have an explicit religious orientation. Like Germany has to reclaim itself as being Christian. And that's, I think, one of the more difficult things with the European context and the American context is, despite the Masonic Protestant evangelical bent of American Christianity, the just based on Pew Research data, a larger swath of the American population explicitly identifies themselves as Christian compared to Europeans. And it's so sad because Europe is the place where it has the history. They have the churches, they have, the saints, some saints that we recognize as Orthodox, but you get my point. And I think until there's a sort of a reemergence of because you can be German, but you have to have some sort of larger ethos and transcendental meaning behind what it is that you're defending. And so until these Western nations actually become explicit about what their religious orientation is and what they're defending and what they're promoting, I mean, it's just like you're fighting people. You're still using multiculturalism, but you're saying, okay, everybody's cool, but we really don't like that, guys. We really don't like that. Don't do that. But you can't justify what it is. You're just hoping that maybe they'll assimilate. But to Roscoe's point about what's already happened in Canada, and we're seeing it happen here in the United States, and I'm watching it happen here in Indiana, is the immigrants come in and they just build enclaves and they take over entire neighborhoods. And then you can go to a place and everybody's speaking Hindi to each other. And okay, having a homogenous country in the new world, not going to happen. But there could be or should be an explicit recognition that anybody who came to the United States, that this is a nation that does not celebrate Diwali. It does not celebrate, Ramadan. We only celebrate Christian holidays. Now, I get it. I still think it's a tough sell. And that's why I think orthodoxy in the long-term game is really going to be the only option. Because when I look at these Indian communities, their Hinduism is so deep. When I look at the Muslims communities, their Islam is so deep. When I look at, the Baptist communities, they're very American, but how deep is the religious identity? Because I guarantee you, when you go in there and you talk to some of the parishioners, their children aren't part of it. Their children have already apostatized and they've gone and done their own thing. And they're, the cute girls are on their hot girl summer journey. And it's like, that's not going to compete well. The only thing that's going to compete well is a insular community that's very explicit about its identity and its religious devotion. And so I think there's a future for trad Caths, although I think it's going to be harder because the Catholic Church is going to continue to go in the direction it's going. But the Orthodox, I think it's the only way out. I think that's why more and more people are flocking to it, because if there is an America, let's say there is a great war, as some have speculated, and the American experiment is essentially restarted. The Orthodox families that have tons of children that are very explicit and are not secular. And I mean, when I mean secular, I mean, they do not promote secularism or believe in secularism. I think that's the way forward.
I completely agree. So going back to what you asked, Roscoe, I wanted to say, I don't think it's either the Muslim or the Jew. Of course, they are enemies of Christ. But I think that the problem, the immediate problem, is the liberal that allows them to do whatever they want. I think the problem is the liberal that says liberalism and Christianity are compatible, or the liberal that says liberalism comes from Christianity, or the Christian that says my Christianity is perfectly in line with liberalism. That's like not only in terms of what needs to change, I think, but also like the inner liberal that we have in our own in our own, let's say, history. Because at least from my perspective, I come from a Catholic country that was very steeped in Enlightenment philosophy, and I would say that I carry all the baggage of, let's say, the wrong theology of Catholicism, but which I never was, by the way. I was never actually Catholic, and I also carry all of the mistakes that the Enlightenment anthropology uh, taught my parents, taught every, like my grandparents, how to think about the world and how to treat other people. So we have to kill the inner liberal as well. We have to repent. But yeah,
Right. No, I agree with that. I think Christ is the only, I would say, to use your analogy, I guess, to kill the inner liberal, dying for Christ, or finding a faith that if pressed, you had the strength to be a martyr for Christ. That's the only thing that we have is resistance. And so I think, getting away from not just classical liberalism and the liberal presuppositions, but any form of compromised Christianity, it's not gonna suffice. And honestly, I think that's why Mormons are going to do well. I think Mormonism is going to grow in America. I think one of the reasons why Orthodoxy needs to evangelize and continue to do a lot of more Mormon apologetics is, for one reason or another, their community is insular, and they're able to, there is a huge conversion rate, or people leaving and then people converting. So it's kind of staying stagnant. But I could see it growing in the United States just because it's more of a solid communal identity than most, Baptist or Reformed ministries.
yes,
Just to put in perspective, what is it? So for the boomer generation, 0.5% of American boomers are Orthodox. 1.5% of Gen Z Americans are Orthodox. So there is definite growth that's happening. And the phrase, as Ivan said, it's altar before throne, temple before palace. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. And in terms of, I know people have used the examples of Reconquista of Spain or Russia as well, when they threw off the Mongol yoke. In both cases, they reproduced their way out of the problem. That was where most of the war was fought, where they were literally having double the number of children that the invaders were having. You can see the same thing even in the 20th century. So like the British, they colonized Fiji and they flooded Fiji with a whole lot of Hindus, where it was overwhelmingly Hindu. And today Fiji is again majority Fijian. And it's because the Fijians, they had converted to, in their case, they converted to Methodism as a whole people. And they've reproduced their way to where they now have the majority of their islands back.
Yeah. Suck Duck said, honorary mention, the Amish. Yeah, you're right. The Amish are going to be here, and they're not going to have the autism rates that the rest of the general population is going to have. Stop taking your Tylenol, pregnant women. So anyways, you guys have anything else you want to say before wrapping up here? All right. Well, God bless everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for everyone who's supported. FYI, we'll be doing an hour-long stream on peptides with Dr. Mo Friday. And then that's going to lead into a private Q&A over at the Logos Academy, where anybody who's a member can ask specific questions regarding your health, hormones, testosterone, peptides, supplements. So it's basically, if you're a member, it's a free consultation. But consultations for men's health doctors, specialists, it can range anywhere between $250 to $350 for a half an hour. So we're going to be doing that Friday. And if anybody's interested, you can join, at least for the free part. We'll be live for about an hour, no more than an hour and a half. And then we're going to be moving the meeting over to Zoom. So if anybody's interested, go join the Logos Academy. I'll share that link with you guys right here. And if anybody is interested, again, you can purchase my book, Return to Babylon, From Adam to Antichrist, over on Amazon. Those links are in the video description. And if you've purchased one through my website, know that the first 40 copies have been sent out. I have no more bubble mailers. I get more Saturday, and then I will ship out the rest of the books that I have, which I believe is 30. So the next 30 people will be sent their copies. And if you've purchased and you don't receive your copy in the next week, it's because I've ran out of books. I get the next shipment of books, according to Amazon, November 8th, and that'll be 50 more books. So just FYI. But thank you all so much. Thank you for the support. God bless you all. God bless your families. And I'll see you in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.